Part 38. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 376. Thunder flashed in the sky. As Yao Meng finished speaking, everyone's eyes turned to Muzian, who had been standing quietly beside Yao Meng. He looked as if he didn't care about anything. His luxurious black robe gave him a bit of a noble temperament, and his handsome features seemed to be filled with mist, like a god. With a smile on his face and a calm look on his face, his black robe was fluttering in the cold wind, his demeanor was graceful, and he looked like he had no interest in anything around him. Of course, this is just Muzian in the eyes of everyone. They never expected that the smile on Muzian's face was already a little frothy at this moment. The so-called indifference was just because of Yao Meng's previous words that it was still a bit unrelieved. I'm super, why am I getting married? I know that Yao Xian will target me because my respected sister Qingdi is favored by me, an outsider, but aren't your words pushing your sister Qingdi towards me? Outsiders cannot step into the Tiandan Phoenix tree. This is the rule of Yaokai. Well, Qingdi directly announced that he will get married in 1 month. Now he is my fiancé, do you still have any objections? Yao Meng's previous actions not only meant to protect her husband, but also may have her own original thoughts. But if Yao Xian hadn't pushed the situation ahead, this Qingdi sister might not have said this. Yao Meng looked around at the elders in front of him and said with a smile, Muzian once rescued me from the pilgrimage hall, and then went to the restricted area alone to bring the water of reincarnation. Only he and I know the price he paid during this period. If it weren't for him, you wouldn't even be able to see this person now. Therefore, I don't want to hear similar questions again. After the words fell, all the elders responded one after another. Mr. Mu is kind to me, Yaokai, so naturally we shouldn't have any doubts about him. We are all reassured by the vision of the Holy Lady. All the disciples of Yaokai also spoke one after another, agreeing with Yao Meng's words. A female elder from Yao Xian's faction said in a stern tone, Yao Xian, come to Xianyu Palace to find me later. Yao Xian blinked her beautiful eyes and said obediently. But such obedience made the female elder glare at her angrily. Anyone with a discerning eye can see that Yao Xian is deliberately cooperating with the Holy Lady in this scene. Although Yao Xian is still young and has always been arrogant because of her talent and family background, she has been smart since she was a child and knows what to do in any situation. It is impossible for her to speak against Mu in the presence of Emperor Qing. Muzian saved the Qing Emperor, which naturally made the Yaokai Holy Land extremely grateful, and even regarded him as the benefactor of the Yaokai Holy Land. But a benefactor is a benefactor, and you abducted the Holy Lady, that's a bit unacceptable. The time that Emperor Qing stayed in the Yaokai Holy Land was far less than 1% of the time he spent with Muzian. Although no one spoke, some people were still somewhat dissatisfied with Muzian. Qingdi's words were meant to educate Yao Xian on the surface, but in reality they were more of a secret attack on those elders and even Yaokai disciples who were somewhat hostile to Muzian. At the same time, some female elders were also asked to calm down and stop worrying about the natural furnace cauldron. Although the natural furnace cauldron is good, she is the only one who can use it in the Yaokai Holy Land. Do you have anything else to say? Yao Meng looked around at everyone with a smile and continued, if there is nothing else, I will go to the Tiandan Phoenix tree with him first. Elder Yaokai quickly came to his senses, raised his hands and bowed, of course we have no objection to the decision of the Holy Lady. All the elders raised their hands and bowed. Yao Meng nodded with satisfaction. He stared at Muzian with his beautiful eyes and said with a smile, let's go. Under the heavenly pill phoenix tree is a cavern that Yao Meng originally built, but now that cavern is used to imprison one of the saints in the southern wilderness. 2 extremely large dragon birds pulled the carriage along a green path at low altitude. Muzian leaned in the carriage and looked at the scenery outside the cave. At this time, Yao Meng suddenly reached out to hold Musian's arm and asked softly, "Do you blame me for talking about marriage without discussing it with you? If you don't open your mouth, even if I can come in, I will inevitably make some gossip." Musian took advantage of the situation and put his hand on Sister Fairy's flawless white jade legs, caressing them intentionally or unintentionally, and continued to ask, "But are you serious? Getting married in the Yaokai Holy Land a month later, if Ruoxi knew about it, no matter how considerate and gentle she was, she would probably turn black on the spot." It was impossible for Yao Meng not to know about this kind of thing. Yao Meng whispered, "What if I said it seriously? That might turn into a marriage-robbing drama." Musian pondered for a moment, shook his head and said, "This doesn't seem like your style. You're not the kind of person who likes to put his feelings on the bright side." Yao Meng smiled, "A wedding is also a time when all kinds of people gather. The more chaotic the situation becomes, will someone want to muddy the waters?" Musian paused slightly while stroking his palms, and said to himself, "However, there are several Hedeo realm existences in Dongzhou today. Are there really people with evil intentions who would target Yaokai?" Yao Meng said softly, "Just in case, Nanhuang has been silent these years, but this does not mean that they will really practice Taoism with peace of mind. Look at this." She took out a shabby sheepskin picture from the ring. Musian took a look and subconsciously took out the fragment of the Jiyuan treasure map in his naja. "I found this from Gu Boxing's Taoist temple when I went to the Daqian dynasty," Yao Meng said quietly. Musian looked at it for a few times and wondered, Gu Boxing has been looking for peripheral items related to the original witch, the inheritance he received is also related to the original witch, but where did he get this map? Yao Meng shook his head and said, "I have scanned his spiritual consciousness before. This treasure map was given to him by the monks in the southern wilderness in the past. However, a layer of taboos was imposed on his mind, and I cannot forcefully read it memory. The forces of Nanhuang have already penetrated into the dynasty, so you want to use the name of the wedding to see how many fish will surface." Musian sighed softly, "Your idea is really good. The last time the restricted area came forward, many forces on the surface were eliminated, but there were still some Dongzhou forces hidden underwater. And Qing Emperor is making a big net, preparing to catch all the fish in the dark." Yao Meng smiled and said, "After this, I will negotiate with you about the specific time of the wedding." "After that?" Musian murmured, "If others find out, the place where you see me next time may be in a small dark room. It might be in the restricted area, or it might be in the Sword Palace. I know this will make things difficult for you, but it's also for Dongzhou, isn't it?" Yao Meng gently pinched the hem of her skirt with both hands, leaned forward slightly, and said in a sweet and soft voice, "Maybe I can make it up to you when I go back. What do you think, Master?" "Grass. Is this a fairy or a goblin?" Musian almost had the urge to execute Yao Meng directly on the spot. However, at this time, the carriage was already safely parked on the ground, and the two of them had reached the depths of the Tiandan phoenix tree unknowingly. Musian suppressed the impulse and said, "Anyway, let's go see the saint first, and let's talk about the rest later. If you are willing, you can finish the business first and then go." Yao Meng said the heartwarming suggestion with a smile. Although his tone was understated, there was an obvious intoxicating blush on his face. Musian stretched out his hand through the silk-like material of the green gauze skirt, gently patted her buttocks, and said, "Let's finish the trivial matters first and then do the serious business. Although I was a little impulsive after being provoked by this fairy, the heavenly pill phoenix tree is the most sacred place in the Yaokai Holy Land. In the past, Yaokai disciples prayed devoutly under the heavenly pill phoenix tree every day. If in such a place with the first-generation saint of Yaokai, after all, female intimacy makes people feel a little embarrassed. Of course, these are all excuses, but Musian also needs to give himself some buffer time. He had been traveling for the past 2 days and didn't get much rest. After returning, he and Yao Meng practiced together. No matter how vast the spiritual energy was, he still needed some rest time. With the magnificent ancient palace in sight, Musian jumped out of the carriage and heard a cold and elegant voice coming from beside him, "Come with me." Following Yao Meng, he stepped into the ancient palace and stepped on the soft red carpet. Not long after, he saw a woman in a black dress at the end of the red carpet. Her body is wrapped with green vines, which perfectly accentuates Maomen's figure. Although not much skin is exposed, it looks astringent no matter how you look at it. I remember seeing her somewhere before. Musian looked up and down a few times, and then when he saw that face, he immediately recognized the other person's identity, the evil god of the southern wilderness who attacked the Yaokai Holy Land before. Yao Meng nodded slightly. "I erased her body and trapped her spiritual consciousness here. I wanted to read the memories in her spiritual consciousness, but she had imposed a taboo on her mind a long time ago. If she forced it if read, her spirit body will explode. She is really loyal to Nanhuang," Musian said to himself. "I remember her name was Lina." The conversation between the two was naturally noticed by Lina in the distance. She slowly raised her head. Her eyes no longer had the charm and indifference of the past. She slowly opened her eyes wide and said in surprise, "It's you, you are still alive." Musian showed an elegant smile. "Thanks to Miss Lina, I am lucky to have survived." Lina glanced at him and snorted, "Qing Emperor, Nanhuang was just to prevent you from being promoted to Hedeo. This is all I know. Even if you kill me, it will be useless." Yao Meng looked at her for a few times and chuckled, "Are you about to be promoted to enlightenment? If you can return to southern wilderness, with your strength, I am afraid you will be reused in southern wilderness, right? For them, even the realm of enlightenment is of some value, but it is not enough for them to mobilize their troops." Lina glanced at Yao Meng indifferently. "If they really mobilize their troops and want to take me back to the southern wilderness, the current Yaokai Holy Land will not be able to resist them. Although you are a Hedeo, your spiritual energy is not enough. After all, it is lacking." Lina continued, "Even if I die, there will still be the true heir of Nanhuang in the future. You can't shake the foundation of Nanhuang." For her, it was basically impossible to escape from being trapped here by Qing Emperor, so she accidentally touched the threshold of enlightenment when she was trapped here, hoping to use the thunder catastrophe caused by this to blast open the Tiandan Phoenix tree. However, not long ago, the Yaokai elders used a formation to shield the heavenly secrets, and the thunder calamity was gradually disappearing. And now Qing Emperor came in person, which also extinguished the last hope in Lina's heart. But even so, he still won. At least she never revealed Nanhuang's purpose from beginning to end, and even Qing Emperor had nothing to do. "The true heir of Nanhuang, do you mean Regina?" Musian suddenly asked. Lina was stunned for a moment, then her eyes widened slightly, and she almost subconsciously raised her head to look at Musian. But after just a moment, she forced herself to be calm, calmly withdrew her gaze and remained silent. However, this scene was already fully visible to Musian. He looked at the woman in black dress playfully and said with a smile, "It seems that even in the southern wilderness, Miss Regina's status is extremely high. You really didn't lie to me before." Lina subconsciously raised her head and frowned. "Do you know her?" "Not only do I know her, I probably know more secrets about her than you do." Yao Meng glanced at Musian faintly. Musian pretended not to notice, walked up to Lina leisurely, looked at the bulging figure that was perfectly restrained by vines, and said, "Not long ago, she talked to me about her soul-reading physique." When Lina heard this, she sneered, "Many people know about soul-reading in the southern wilderness. It's useless to get close to me in this way." Musian chuckled softly, "There are many people who know that soul-reading can evolve, but how many people know that soul-reading can evolve? Impossible." Almost at that moment, Lina immediately refuted, "The soul-reading body is an innate physique, how can it still evolve? It is naturally impossible to complete the evolution under normal circumstances, but if it is supplemented by the water of reincarnation in the restricted area, the physique can complete the evolution again, Musian said calmly. Lena said coldly, reincarnation water can only be used by people with restricted bloodline. Do you think I don't know this? Musian showed a gentle smile and used voice transmission. You should know how I reshaped the Qing Emperor's body in the past, right? Lena's eyes flashed slightly and she remained silent. She naturally knew that Musian was a natural cauldron. After all, when she teamed up with others to attack the Yaokai Holy Land, she had planned to take Musian as a male servant because she had taken a fancy to his natural cauldron. After going to the restricted area, some of the reincarnation water remained in my natural furnace. Musian continued to transmit the message. Lena's throat rolled, her plump chest rose and fell slightly, and there was a hint of excitement in her eyes. Regina is the #1 young person in the history of the Southern Wilderness, and the soul-reading body in the Southern Wilderness is very similar to the first pillar god in the Southern Wilderness. There were rumors from the beginning that if Regina was given a certain amount of time, she might be able to surpass her ancestors in the future. If the soul-reading body can complete the evolution. Lena's eyes flickered slightly, and she suddenly said, if you can really help her, I can tell you everything I know. She slowly raised her head and stared into Musian's eyes, but before that, I want to see Regina first. You will see her. Musian smiled gently. At this time, Qing Emperor had already raised his hand to summon the pure world Qinglian, enveloping Lena in it. After sealing her cauldron, the sound of thunder and calamity outside finally disappeared. Musian did not continue talking to Lena, but followed Yao Meng and left the ancient palace. Although it is not clear what kind of status Regina has in the hearts of the monks in Southern Wilderness, judging from the fact that a Southern Wilderness evil god who is close to the realm of enlightenment pays so much attention to her, Regina's background may be really shocking. 2 huge dragon birds pulled up the carriage and slowly headed towards the exit of the cave. What did you talk to her about just now? Her attitude towards you seems to have changed a lot. Yao Meng sat on the sofa with her legs together, glanced slightly at the young man beside her, and asked softly. Most of the monks in the Southern Wilderness have great respect for the saint of the Southern Wilderness. I have had contact with Regina before. I think Lena's attitude towards me has softened because of this, Musian said with a smile. It's impossible to tell anyone about the deal between him and Regina now. If Sister Kingdee knew that he was going to hand over the reincarnation water to Regina through the natural furnace cauldron, he would probably be benched by her now. Even if he wasn't used as a bench, he would still have to be locked up in a small dark room for 10.5 days. Yao Meng glanced at Musian meaningfully and said quietly, just because you have had contact with the Holy Maiden of the Southern Wilderness, her attitude towards you is so much friendly. Musian shook his head and smiled. Of course it doesn't stop. I also promised her that I will ask Regina to meet her after this. In this way, she will tell everything she knows. The heavenly pill phoenix tree cannot allow outsiders to enter, but when the time comes, all we need to do is take Lena out of the heavenly pill phoenix tree, right? Yao Meng fell silent and stared at Musian with suspicious eyes, making him doubt his life. Musian had no choice but to break the slightly silent atmosphere. Speaking of which, how is your aura now? Although Yao Meng reunited, her spiritual energy had been depleted before. To put it bluntly, she was deliberately suppressing the speed at which she absorbed spiritual energy. After all, the spiritual energy required for a Hedeo realm is too vast. What Lena just said is right. Yao Meng is currently at the Hedeo realm, but he is not a true Hedeo. He can only absorb the spiritual energy between heaven and earth for his own use. Only then can we reunite. Yao Meng said calmly, don't worry, although I have never been in harmony with heaven, earth, and man, the state of harmony is the state of harmony. The so-called lack of spiritual energy is only compared with the state of harmony, but it is enough to deal with most situations. Musian stretched out his hand to hold Yao Meng in his arms, and reached into his clothes, whispering, "If you want, it should not be difficult to absorb the spiritual energy between heaven and earth for your own use. Why do you keep it back?" The warm breath covered herself, and Yao Meng's delicate body seemed to be a little hot, and her cheeks were stained with a charming blush. She glanced at the little enemy quietly, but did not stop his reckless palm. She just bit her lower lip and tried to maintain the cold image of a fairy. "If I can merge with the Tao again in this life, others will have no chance. Besides, I used to follow the heavenly Dao, but now the heavenly Dao has changed. The human Dao and the earthly Dao need to erase their own cultivation and cultivate again. If there is no worry, it is fine, but now." She was silent for a moment, put her slender hand on the back of Musian's hand, lowered her eyes and looked at her full chest, and said softly, "Compared to practicing, I still want to be with you more. The heavenly Dao has changed, so Yao Meng does not plan to merge with the heavenly Dao again. The earthly Dao and the human Dao require cultivators to start practicing again from the refining essence realm, so Yao Meng has never merged with the heaven, earth, and man Dao. This is also the decision she made when she planned to be with Musian. For her, it is not important whether she can achieve the real merging Dao realm. If we change to another heavenly way, is it feasible? Musian suddenly asked. Change to another heavenly way. Yao Meng was stunned at first, then looked at the hand on her beautiful leg. Her pretty face was slightly hot, and she glared at him. "Can you be serious when you are talking about serious things?" Musian looked calm, and said seriously, "I am helping you massage your tendons and blood circulation. If you are willing, I can even give you an indescribable upgraded massage after returning." Yao Meng glared at him, charming and charming, with a touch of tenderness and numbness in her voice. "What do you mean by another heavenly way just now?" "New heavenly way." He looked into Yao Meng's eyes and smiled. "I even think that the spiritual energy you lost can also be replenished in the heavenly court. But according to the rules of the heavenly court, you may have to prepare stockings and skirts made of nirvana silk." So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 377. What is the new way of heaven you mentioned earlier? Yao Meng stared at the young man not far in front of him expressionlessly, and finally couldn't help but speak. "The ancient coffin is connected to the passage to the heaven, and Musian can use the ancient coffin to invite other monks to let their spiritual consciousness step into the heaven. After they returned to the attic where they lived, Musian used the ancient coffin to bring Yao Meng's spiritual consciousness to the heaven. However, the way Sister Kingdi is dressed at this moment is obviously a little different from usual. Also, are you sure you need to dress like this if you want to step into heaven?" Yao Meng awkwardly pressed her hands on the skirt that was too low. The cyan skirt was replaced by a short black skirt. The skirt reached the top of her thighs. A pair of white, tender, and attractive legs were wrapped in translucent black silk. On her feet were a pair of stiletto heels. Every step he took was accompanied by a sultry sound. When he was barefoot, he was about the same height as Musian, but now Yao Meng's body proportions are taller and sexier, and he seems to be slightly taller than Musian. "Well, this is the rule of heaven, and there is nothing I can do to change it." Musian coughed lightly, looked at Yao Meng a few more times, then smiled and said, "And it suits you very well. Normally, the beauty of a fairy who does not eat the fireworks of the world is extremely beautiful, but occasionally she changes into another outfit, which not only retains some of the fireworks of the fairy, but also reveals a bit of sex appeal. It's really too hot." No matter how stable his Taoist heart was, Yao Meng would inevitably give Musian a sideways glance. But then, under Musian's burning gaze, she pressed the hem of her skirt awkwardly and gently rubbed her legs. Her face, which was as delicate and flawless as ice and snow, showed a beautiful crimson color, and even her earlobe seemed to be showing a crimson color. No matter how immaculate you are on weekdays, walking in the heaven with Musian wearing such a shameful dress, even if there is no one around, will inevitably make you feel a little ashamed. If she had known earlier, she shouldn't have listened to him. Musian was obviously teasing her. Didn't you prepare these clothes and skirts yourself? Why are you so embarrassed? Musian stepped forward and took her soft little hand, raised his head and smiled. Yao Meng glanced at him, and there was a hint of shyness in her soft voice that was as friendly as a big sister in the past. She said quietly, I just plan to try it out in the house occasionally when I feel like it, but I don't want to go with you dressed like this in heaven. But fortunately, she still has the fairy mist covering her body. Not to mention that there is no one in front of the heaven, even if there are people watching, it is impossible to see through this fairy mist. Do you like stockings that much? She asked again. Musian shook his head and said seriously, I think you are more suitable for bare legs, but if you try wearing it like this occasionally, it feels good. He raised his head and looked at the gate of the ancient heaven at the end of the immortal road. You can try to push the door open now, I think there should be no problem. He set the rules of heaven, but after setting the rules, he has not yet tried whether he can set foot in heaven as long as he abides by the rules. Yao Meng glanced sideways at Musian, then gently raised his hand, pressed it in front of the heavenly door, and gently pushed it open. The aura of the Hedeo realm, is there finally a business? I thought you had forgotten me, big brother. A clear and melodious voice of a little loli came from the heaven. A silver-haired loli behind the door suddenly hit her like a bad girl and rushed forward to hug Musian's thigh. The soft shawl silver hair hangs down naturally, and a dull hair is twitching on the head. He rubs his face gently on Musian's body, like a clingy cat. Lori. Yao Meng blinked her bright green eyes, and then looked at Musian in surprise as if she were meeting him for the first time. You are really punished for secretly hiding such a cute Lolita in the heaven. Musian said speechlessly, if I really hid my wife in heaven, how could I bring you to heaven as well? I didn't hide her here, but she was originally in heaven. Yao Meng looked at the silver-haired loli suspiciously and asked hesitantly, who is she? Father. Yuan Luo raised her head, blinked her bright red eyes playfully, looked up at Musian, and opened her hands for a hug. For a moment, the atmosphere in the heaven fell into an eerie silence. Yao Meng looked at Musian doubtfully for a few times, with a gentle light in his eyes, and slowly asked a question. Musian lightly slapped Yuan Luo on the head, rubbed her smooth hair, and said, stop making trouble, Sister Qingdi is my Taoist companion, let's be serious, we have to do business later. Yao Meng narrowed her beautiful eyes, looked at the silver-haired Lolita, and said softly, who did you have this child with? Calm down, if I really have a daughter, how could I bring you here to meet her? Musian gently pressed Yuan Luo's dull hair and pushed her head away gently, saying, the new heavenly way I mentioned earlier is this child. You can call her Yuan Luo. Yao Meng's expression remained unchanged, looking at Yuan Luo indifferently, and then glanced at Musian teasingly, I thought you secretly raised a Lolita to be your wife in heaven, if that's the case, I should consider locking you in a small dark room in Yaokai and think about it. Then, she said to herself, she does not belong to Kyushu, so she is called New Tiandao. Yao Meng could naturally see something special about this loli. This loli didn't even have any fluctuations in spiritual energy or even the slightest breath, because she didn't belong to the category of living beings. If the heavenly way of Kyushu is the will condensed by the spirits of all things, then Yuan Luo is the will born from heaven. By rejoining the way in heaven and absorbing the spiritual energy here for your own use, you can avoid the heavenly way of Kyushu. There is no need to practice again or even rejoin the way, right? After all, she was the empress who had stood in the world for thousands of years. Yao Meng knew Musian's thoughts immediately, and an unprecedented light flashed in her eyes. Yuan Luo pointed to the gate of heaven and said with a smile, as long as you step into that gate, you can absorb the spiritual energy of heaven for your own use. As for the way to combine with Tao, since you have done so before, you know what to do after thinking about it. Yao Meng nodded silently. Musian said, if you can replenish the depleted cauldron to a full state in the heaven, then even if there is any movement in the darkness in the southern wilderness, you can handle it with ease. It's not just as simple as being able to cope with it. A charming smile appeared on Yao Meng's face, and he said softly, now some monks in Kyushu know that although I have become a Taoist, the spiritual energy in the cauldron has not been absorbed much. I guess some people will be lax and careless because of this. She lazily raised her eyes and stared at Musian, maybe I can give them a surprise then. But the future matters will be dealt with slowly later. Now, compared to this kind of thing, there is one thing I am a little concerned about. Yao Meng glanced at the silver-haired loli standing beside them with her little hands behind her back, and asked softly, Yuan Luo, do you know who made the rules of heaven? The rules of heaven, Yuan Luo blinked, tilted her head, and subconsciously glanced at Musian. Yao Meng elegantly pulled up a strand of thin hair with her little finger, and gently rested it on her shoulders. She raised her eyes and said in a lazy voice, you should have seen my dress, this someone told me that the rules of heaven are like this, so I followed him here dressed like this. Musian gave Yuan Luo a you-know look. Yuan Luo nodded obediently without leaving any trace, and secretly gave Musian a thumbs up, expressing the meaning of brother, be safe. Then he said in an inhumane and cold voice, he set the rules. Musian. If it weren't for the wrong situation, he would have picked up the kite and taught it a lesson. Then I'll disturb you too and go back to heaven first. Yuan Luo lifted up her skirt, saluted gracefully in the direction of Musian, turned around and turned into pale white light particles, disappearing from sight. Musian originally wanted to reach out and grab her back, but when he thought of Yao Meng beside him who was still staring at him eagerly, his hand finally dropped weakly. So, the so-called heavenly rules requiring wearing stockings and skirts are really your own bad idea, right? Even though she was such a beautiful and refined fairy, she couldn't help but take another look at Musian at this moment. There was a hint of disdain and disgust in her eyes, a look of disdain that said, I never expected you to be this kind of Musian. She raised her snow-white chin slightly and looked at Musian with a smile, you asked me to spend so much effort to change into a skirt and stockings and then accompany you to heaven, don't you have anything to say now? Musian thought for a few seconds and said, I suddenly realized that this look seems to suit you very well. Can you show this look next time you step on me? Yao Meng. Musian sighed softly, looked up and stared at Yao Meng again, and said, I just want to see you wearing a skirt that exposes your thighs from time to time, then put on black or white silk, and wear a pair of high heels. Is this wrong? If the situation is not urgent and there is no time to modify the rules, I would actually like to let you wear the restraint rope in the attic and the indescribable ball, if possible, it is best to add a leg ring. Sister Kingdi, who was indifferent by nature, still maintained a smile and just raised her fingers towards Musian. Then when he stepped forward, he gently arched his fingers and flicked his head. Next time something like this happens, please tell me clearly in advance. Yao Meng paused, glanced at him, and continued, if I make it clear, I can't consider satisfying your hobby. Musian was startled, what about the restraint rope and the indescribable ball? Yao Meng gave him a charming look and said softly, get out. After a while, Xiangfeng left the table and looked at Yao Meng stepping into the direction of heaven. Musian pondered for a moment and suddenly said, Sister Ye, what should Senior Ye do? Yao Meng looked sideways and said with a smile, she can warm and nourish her spiritual consciousness in your natural furnace, so don't worry about it. As for you, the spiritual energy of heaven is extremely rich, and it only takes a few days to absorb the spiritual energy. I will leave heaven to see you soon, don't worry. The problem is that I am afraid that Sister Ye will get bored in my natural furnace alone, and I will get bored easily if I stay alone in Yaokai. Musian nodded slightly, I understand. He was about to leave temporarily when he suddenly heard the sexy and melodious sound of high heels hitting the ground. Musian raised his head, and Yao Meng had already approached him. With a slight curve at the corner of his mouth, he bent slightly, put his hands on his knees, and said in his ear with a soft and seductive voice, "You said restraint. Rope, it's not like I can't think about it after I get out." After saying that, she lowered her head and kissed him on the face. The slightly cool touch was imprinted on her face, accompanied by a light red lip print. Woo! Before Yao Meng could speak again, Musian had already reached out and hugged Yao Meng's slender waist, and then raised his head and kissed her soft lips. At the moment when their lips and teeth touched, Yao Meng was stunned for a moment, and then her eyes gradually softened, slowly closed her eyes, and her long and curled eyelashes trembled slightly. At this time, a name had already appeared behind the first seat on Musian's personal interface. And behind that name, there was a reminder to confirm again. "Admit it." Musian opened his eyes and whispered in his heart. Along with the intimate sound of the two people's spiritual energy intertwined with each other, Yao Meng suddenly felt vaguely that some kind of restraint between heaven and earth seemed to be gradually breaking. She slowly opened her eyes and stared at Musian in surprise. The rules of heaven and earth have always restricted the cultivators of Juzhu from the past to the present, and the Hedeo realm is already the limit of cultivators. But Musian gave her the first seat in the heavenly court. And at this moment, the shackles of the Hedeo realm were also untied. After a long time, their lips parted. Yao Meng gently wiped the remaining water stains on her red lips with a handkerchief, and then carefully wiped Musian's lips. "You gave me the first seat in the heavenly court, don't you regret it?" She glanced at the red lip print on his right cheek and showed a charming smile on her face. "This feeling is like leaving a mark on the body, with an indescribable sense of pleasure. I won't regret giving it to you." Musian smiled, with a hint of relief in his expression. A trace of tenderness flashed in Yao Meng's beautiful eyes, and she whispered, "Thank you. In a few days, you will see a different me." Musian held her soft little hand and smiled, "I am looking forward to it." Bairuoxi's long hair fluttered in the cold wind, and her huge heart trembled gently, with magnificent waves. She had a very good figure and a tall figure. Her snow-like palace skirt was embroidered with plum blossoms, and she wore a cloak to keep warm. She was cold and weak, with a charm that was enough to make people pity her. She had arrived at the Yaoqi Holy Land a day ago, but the Yaoqi Holy Land was no longer the same as before, and the formations were complicated and numerous. If she broke in by force, it would be feasible, but it would definitely be noticed by the Green Emperor. Therefore, she spent most of the day to crack the layers of formations without being noticed by any Yaoqi disciples. "Is this the Yaokai Holy Land?" Bairuoxi said softly, "I wonder if Mu Lang is really here. I have used my spiritual sense to confirm before. He is in a south-facing attic, but I did not sense the breath of the Green Emperor. I wonder if he has left or not." Gong Lianyu's voice came from Bairuoxi's heart. Before Bairuoxi returned to the Void Realm, she could not keep her spiritual sense awake all the time. Only after the formation was cracked, Bairuoxi took the leading position. Bairuoxi smiled gently, raised his head and looked in a certain direction of the Yaokai Holy Land. His voice was cold and textured, and he said softly, "If she is not here, wouldn't it be better? Just sleep peacefully. After this, I will find Mu Lang and bring him back to Lianji section." Musian wiped the red lip marks on his face in front of the bronze mirror. As an old driver who often spends time in the flowers, how could he not have this experience? Yao Meng knew that Master Mu liked to eat the rouge on her lips, so she deliberately put on light makeup, and even applied a layer of rouge with bright and charming colors. As expected, she was almost eaten by Musian when she entered the heavenly palace not long ago. After wiping it clean, Musian raised his hand to open the personal interface and took a look at the text on it. In addition to those titles, under the title of the Lord of the Heavenly Palace, the four big words "First Seat" appeared. And behind the words, a name has already appeared. First seat in the heavenly palace, Yao Meng/Lin. I know the first seat, after all, it was given to Yao Meng by me, but what does the word Lin at the end mean? Musian's eyes flickered slightly, with a bit of thought in his eyes. He raised his fingertips and gently touched the title of the first seat, but there was no reaction. Well, it seems that I can only ask Yao Meng after she leaves the heavenly palace. Musian raised his hand to stretch his waist and closed the personal interface. Then he turned his head and looked at the cold fairy lying on the bed beside him with her eyes closed. At this time, Yao Meng changed into a sexy dress that was completely different from the past according to Musian's previous request, but every inch of her skin had a faint fluorescence, and her body was filled with fairy mist that seemed to come from the sky, making it difficult to see her body. In the past, Yao Meng had only a wisp of spiritual consciousness, so it was extremely difficult, but under normal circumstances, for a great man in the Hedeo realm, as long as the spiritual consciousness is still there, he can reshape his body at any time. At this moment, even if Yao Meng's spiritual consciousness is in the heavenly court, if someone other than Musian approaches, she can still feel it at the first time. Musian reached out and gently stroked Yao Meng's delicate face like ice and snow, and couldn't help but sighed, I don't know when Sister Mengru will come. Yao Meng had previously asked the disciples of Yao Qi Holy Land to go to Lianji sect to invite Wei Mengru to Yao Qi, but the disciple had just set out for less than half a day, so it should not arrive so soon. Or I can go to Lianji sect during these few days? When Musian just thought of this, the door that was originally closed was suddenly pushed open. Along with it, there was a gentle and charming voice, Mu Lang. Musian raised his head and saw the weak beauty by Ruoxi, whose chest was proud of all the women. She was as cold, weak, and beautiful as always. If you ignore her graceful and plump figure, you will only feel pity for this Miss Bai. But if you glance at her, in addition to pity, you will also want to bully her on the bed and let her look at you with tears in her eyes. Ruoxi, Musian almost blurted out. Why are you here? Bai Ruoxi did not answer, but looked at Yao Meng, who was sleeping in front of the bed with a puzzled look. Then, her weak eyes flickered slightly, and she slowly raised her beautiful eyes and stared at Musian. It seems that Senior Kingdi's spiritual consciousness is not here. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 378. The Jiyuan Palace is always so quiet that one can even hear the sound of a person's heartbeat. The Jiyuan cave is full of corpses. Some are monks who were swallowed by the beast tide not long ago, and some are monks who risked their lives to step into the Jiyuan Palace and died over the past 1,000 years. Snap! Suddenly a hand stretched out from the ground, grabbed the ground fiercely, and climbed out with difficulty. His eyes were red, but there was a bit of luck in his eyes. If it weren't for the blessing of the heavenly Dao, I'm afraid I would have really died here this time. But Yao Shan, that bastard, actually wanted to devour my spiritual consciousness. He underestimated my will. The monk who just escaped by chance was naturally Yayu, who died in the Jiyuan Palace 2 days ago. Not long ago, when the Queen of the Demon Realm took action, the will of the heavenly Dao descended and blessed him. Yao Shan, who wanted to devour his spiritual consciousness, was finally devoured by him after the 2-day rally and completely disappeared between heaven and earth. But now he has lost everything, lost his luck, and his former teacher has been devoured by him. Musian. Yayu's fist slammed hard on the floor, his eyes red, helpless, and furious. In the past, he had never won against Musian with Yao Shan's blessing. Now that Yao Shan is dead, it is even more difficult for him to turn the tables alone. Fortunately, although Yao Shan was lost, it was not without gain. Yayu slowly spread out his palm, and in his palm was a translucent ball of light. Heavenly Qi. This heavenly chi can continuously strengthen his own spiritual consciousness, and even slowly repair and nourish it. He was able to devour Yao Shan this time, thanks to this heavenly chi. Even you couldn't have imagined that I'm still alive and well, Musian. Yu showed a sneer on his face, looked at the heavenly chi in his palm, and said to himself, you secretly colluded with the queen of the demon realm and murdered your fellow disciples. Even if I can't deal with you, there are people who can deal with you. It's a pity that this trip suffered heavy losses. Even the treasure in the abyss may have been taken away by Musian. But if you have the life to take it, you have to have the life to use it. Yu clenched the heavenly chi in his hand, stood up with difficulty and was about to leave. However, at this moment, the heavenly chi in his hand suddenly emitted a faint light. A ray of spiritual consciousness drilled into the heavenly chi, and then a slender figure appeared in front of the heavenly chi. Ice-like skin and jade-like bones, a fluttering red skirt, a head of soft long hair, set off that beautiful and refined face. Yu was almost stunned at the first sight of her. You, who are you? He asked stutteringly. The woman tucked a strand of hair behind her ear gracefully, revealed a faint smile, and whispered, the fourth pillar god of the southern wilderness, the god of space. A faint arc appeared on the corner of her mouth, you can also call me Shui Yi. Soon after the commotion in the abyss, many cultivators in the entire East continent, the demon realm, and the world sea were shocked. In addition, after that, the queen of the demon realm asked to see the leader of the Lianji sect, which made many people sweat coldly on their backs. Dongzhou and the demon realm have always been at odds. If there is a conflict between the two Hedeo realm masters, it will be a disaster for Zhu. Fortunately, when the queen of the demon realm spoke, some people saw that the Green Emperor and the palace master of the Sword Palace had come forward, and a mysterious powerful man took action and finally persuaded the queen of the demon realm to retreat. Because of this incident, many people in Dongzhou are now praising the Green Emperor and Gong Lianyu. But obviously no one thought that they came forward not for Zhu. The scene happening in the Yaokai Holy Land at this moment has explained everything. Mu Lang, after you were taken away by King Di, I was still worried whether King Di Sr. would do something to you. Now that I see you are fine, I feel relieved. Bai Ruoxi lowered her eyes slightly, sat on the bed with one leg and shoulder to shoulder with Musian, with two faint blushes on her beautiful face, as if moisturized, her eyes sparkling. She looked a little more feminine and less cold. A pair of embroidered shoes were placed on the ground under the bed, and there was also a belly band. Compared to Bai Ruoxi, Musian looked a little tired. He stared at the beautiful lady in white and said softly, Senior King Di is the first generation saint of Yaokai, and we have a very good relationship with her. You don't have to worry about my safety. Ruoxi, this trip to Yaokai Holy Land must have consumed a lot of your spiritual energy, right? Bai Ruoxi shook her head, lowered her eyes, and said in a cold and pleasant voice, it didn't consume much spiritual energy. Besides, I just got a lot of spiritual energy from Mu Lang in the natural furnace, which is enough. When she finished speaking, she buried her face, and a hint of shame flashed in her beautiful eyes. After slightly organizing her thoughts, Bai Ruoxi glanced at the sleeping fairy Yao Meng, then raised her eyes and said softly, where did Senior King Di's spiritual consciousness go? Musian looked subtle and said, she is in the heavenly palace. Is that so? Then I feel relieved. Bai Ruoxi put her slender hand on her tall and full chest, as if she was really relieved, revealing a soft and lovely smile. Senior King Di announced your relationship with her so loudly at the Ascension conference. If she knew that we were hugging each other in her training room just now, she would definitely be angry, right? If a great man in the Hedeo realm is angry, it's really scary to think about it, Malang. Yes, Malang knows you are afraid. After all, Ruoxi is a weak and pitiful little white rabbit. She doesn't like palace fighting and has no bad intentions. She is just a good girl who knows how to feel sorry for Malang. She almost riding on Sister Kingdi just now was just an accident. Muzian gently held Bairuoxi's soft little hand to express his comfort, and silently complained in his heart. He took the opportunity to glance at her a few more times. There seemed to be a faint sweat stain on her forehead, and her hair stuck to her beautiful face, revealing a lazy temperament. The dress seemed to have some wrinkles, and a pair of feet wrapped in white short socks were revealed under the skirt. The skin was white and translucent, giving people a pure and flawless soft beauty. But if you look down from Muzian's perspective, you can see a wonderful scene that is different from usual. After all, whether it is love or intimacy, Muzian prefers to be half hidden rather than open, such as letting Miss Bai wear this snow-white palace skirt for intimacy. By the way, if you come to me, doesn't it mean you give up the Ascension Conference? Muzian suddenly asked. Bairuoxi hummed lightly, snuggled in Muzian's warm chest, and said softly, I thought about it, compared with the Ascension Conference, Mulang's side is more important. And the cultivators sent by Jos who this time have all lost except Regina. It is enough to ensure that the person who can win the competition is a cultivator from Dongzhou. Muzian's eyes flickered slightly, and he said, what about Sister Fei Ying's competition? She met Senior Sister when she was about to compete in the final competition. When they fought in the middle, the 8th grade thunder tribulation of the soul refining descended. In order to preserve Senior Sister's combat power, she finally gave up. Bairuoxi didn't keep it a secret. The thunder tribulation does not distinguish between friend and foe, and will involve all the cultivators who approach it. Senior Sister and Sister Fei Ying are competing in the cave, and the venue is not enough. According to the rules, whoever leaves the cave first will lose, right? Muzian thought. Mulang is really smart, but he often doesn't have to do it on the right path. Bairuoxi's eyes flickered slightly, and he stroked Muzian's face with his slender hands, and said softly. Where is Yayu? Muzian asked again. Why did Mulang mention him again? When Yayu was mentioned, Bairuoxi's tone was obviously much colder, and he obviously didn't want to talk about Yayu anymore. I'm just a little curious. Although he died in the Jiyuan, I always feel that with his luck, he would not die so easily, so I'm curious whether he has returned to Lianji sect, Muzian said. Bairuoxi shook his head slowly, I'm not sure either. After all, I haven't been back to Lianji sect since I went to Jiyuan. Speaking of which, there will be an alchemy competition soon after the Ascension Conference, and the winner will get an 8th grade pill. Muzian pondered for a moment and said, if we can win the competition, it will be a natural thing for Luo Tan to exchange the pill for Taigzu pill. If he fails to win the competition, he may have to sell his body. Bairuoxi was stunned. Taigzu pill. Mulang wants Taigzu Dan, could it be for? Muzian nodded slightly and said seriously, yes, it's for Fox-ear girl. He stretched out his hand to grope behind Bairuoxi for a while, and asked in confusion, by the way, where are your tail and ears? Bairuoxi glanced at Muzian in a reproachful manner, and whispered, even if it is a demon cultivator, it can usually hide its identity and make it look no different from an ordinary cultivator. Now that I think about it, I should have asked you to transform into Fox-ear girl just now. Muzian regretted it. Do you like Fox-ear girl so much? Bairuoxi tilted his head in confusion, and really couldn't understand Muzian's strange hobby. Isn't it just 3 more tails and a pair of fox ears? What's the difference between her and now? Fox-eared girls are extremely rare, and occasionally becoming a fox-eared girl will be very fresh. There are many ways to do this. Let's try another way next time. Muzian gently hugged the girl's waist, allowing her to lean on his arms more intimately and feel the fragrance and warmth of Naxi's delicate body. If Mulang likes it so much, then let's do it next time. Bairuoxi closed her eyes slightly and nestled in Muzian's arms. By the way. After a while, she suddenly thought of something, took out a blooming purple flower from her sleeve, raised her eyes slightly and looked at Musian, and said softly, "The hydrangea that Mu Lang gave me before, was it really given by the queen of the demon realm?" When she said the last sentence, a pair of bright eyes looked straight at Musian. The hydrangea that Musian got from the first generation of the Demon King is completely different from the one that he got from the Queen of the Demon Realm. If it was obtained from the first generation of Demon King, then it was equivalent to Musian giving it to her. But if it was obtained from the Demon Queen, then who knows what price Musian paid when he asked the Demon Queen for this magic weapon to block demon energy. "I got it from the Demon Queen," Musian answered truthfully without thinking too much. Bairuoxi asked this question because she already knew it, but just wanted to hear him say it again. There was no point in lying at this time. What's more, Tung Xinchuo on the side is still staring eagerly. Bairuoxi's eyes filled with mist, she looked at Musian faintly, and said softly, "As my realm gradually improves, the demonic aura on my body will become more and more intense. The method of shielding the demonic aura is indeed urgent, but no matter what, I don't want Mu Lang to go out of his way to ask a woman he doesn't know for me. This feeling is a bit similar to a wife going to the big boss of another big company without telling her husband to ask for a special document, and using this special document to help her husband." Thinking of the arrogant look of the Queen of the Demon Realm, and how Musian had to ask in front of her to get the hydrangea that shielded the demonic aura, Bairuoxi subconsciously grasped the hem of her skirt with her little hands, biting her lip gently, feeling angry and aggrieved. Seeing this, Musian held her little hand and guided her to sit on his lap. Gently pressing down on her buttocks through the white dress, the weight completely fell on Musian's body, but the girl was not actually heavy, not to mention that the Tao that Musian practiced was body training. He hugged Bairuoxi's slender waist from behind, looked at her angry and aggrieved look, and comforted her softly, "Don't worry, the Queen of the Demon Realm and I are just doing normal business, and I will continue to provide her with useful information. And she gave me a hydrangea." Miss Bai, who is usually cold, gives people a feeling that she can be seen from a distance but not played with. But at this moment, her moist and beautiful eyes filled with water mist make people want to hold her tightly in her arms. The impulse of pity. Although the Queen of the Demon Realm looks arrogant, she actually has a pretty good temper. When Musian said the last word, he silently buried his face in the girl's fragrant hair, and hugged the girl's delicate body tightly. Malang doesn't understand the Queen of the Demon Realm very well. She is not a kind person. She cannot simply treat you well. Every step she takes must have a purpose. Bairuoxi whispered, "Fortunately, the Queen of the Demon Realm will need to retreat for more than half a year. Even if she has any purpose, my other spiritual consciousness will have already awakened after half a year, and by then I will no longer have to worry about her plotting against you." "Why do you say it like I'm some simple little white rabbit?" Mu Jian complained in his heart, but said on the surface. He was so poor that the Queen of the Demon Realm would help him either because she was interested in his abilities or because she was greedy for his body. No matter which one it was, it actually didn't matter to Musian. However, Ruoxi also cared about her Mu Lang, so naturally he would not throw cold water on her now. After all, Naxi has the biggest breasts, so whatever she says is correct. The two were intimate in the room for a while. Bairuoxi blushed with embarrassment, lowered her head and silently arranged her messy dress and messy hair. She noticed the burning eyes of the young man behind her and whispered, "What are you planning to do? Will you continue to stay in Yaokai?" Musian pondered for a moment and said, "Let's go back to Liangyi sect first. It will take at least a few days for Yao Meng to retreat in heaven. During that time, the Immortal Ascension Conference is coming to an end and Luo Tan's alchemy competition is about to begin. In addition, we still have to confirm whether Yayu is dead or not. No matter what, we have to go back." Moreover, he was bound to get the Taigzu pill that allowed the demon cultivator to evolve. Musian first temporarily placed Yao Meng's immortal body in the ancient coffin, then took a look at the looming blue lotus in the room, and then turned around and walked out of the attic with Bairuoxi. This pure world green lotus was summoned by Yao Meng just in case. Except for the acquaintances she recognized, anyone else who approached rashly would be suppressed by the pure world green lotus. It's just that Yao Meng obviously didn't expect that an acquaintance she recognized would step into the attic. Lianji sect. 3 days ago, there were frequent vibrations in Jiyuan, but it did not affect the prosperity and excitement here. The aura inside the sect is ethereal and rich, and the raindrops falling on the bronze-colored building add a bit of ancient beauty to this Xianjia sect that stands tall in the world and has witnessed the changes of countless dynasties. In other words, you were framed by the master of Ji Abyss, and therefore you were trapped in Ji Abyss Palace for 10,000 years. At this moment, Yayu was rushing all the way to the direction of Lianji sect with his sword, and at the same time, he was conversing in his heart with Shuiyi, the god of space, who was hiding in his Naja. The master of Jiyuan is really insidious and cunning. Not only did he take away all the immortals in Jiyuan, he even designed to harm other monks. Listening to Shuiyi's story, Yayu looked extremely angry, but in fact he was secretly happy. Unexpectedly, although he missed the fairy fate in the abyss this time, he met the fourth pillar god of the southern wilderness who was designed to be trapped in the abyss. Yao Shan died, but he found a spiritual guardian from the Hedeo realm. And she is still such a sexy beauty. In terms of appearance, she is no less than his former fiancée Bairuoxi, and no worse than his sister Ye Lingxian. Although it is a bit bad to think this way, Yayu is very glad that Shuiyi was framed by the master in Jiyuan, otherwise he would not have been able to take such a huge advantage, awaken her through the heavenly energy in his body, and even let her follow him. Senior Shuiyi, please rest assured, I will definitely try my best to condense my body for you. I am an alchemist, and I will definitely find a way in the future, Yayu swore firmly. It's not necessary to condense the body. Shuiyi's voice was calm and gentle, and she said leisurely, before I went to the abyss, I spent a lot of effort to create a body in order to enter the Yahua realm. I sealed her in the formation and nurtured her with many natural treasures. The body can block the secrets of heaven, ignore the rules of heaven and earth, and read the spiritual consciousness of others. If I am not mistaken, she should have become the saint of the southern wasteland as agreed. After finding her, I will have a way to be reborn. Yayu was stunned and repeated, Saint of the southern wasteland. Can you help me? You are the only one I can rely on now, Shuiyi said softly. The soft and pleasant voice and the weak posture, for Yayu, this simple sentence, but it made him lose his soul. I know, I will do my best to help you, Yayu said immediately. Shuiyi showed a charming smile on her face, good kid. But before that, I have a new and old grudge to settle with Musian. Yayu said again, with hatred in his eyes that was hard to conceal. At this time, Yayu seemed to have noticed something, and raised his head slightly to see a dragon bird that seemed to cover the sky soaring in Lianji sect. There were 2 people sitting on the dragon bird. The former was wearing a white snow-white dress, with a gentle and elegant temperament. The latter was wearing a black and luxurious robe with gold thread, with extraordinary bearing. Although her skin was a little pale, it was not at all inconsistent, but added a bit of sickly temperament to it. Just at first glance, it was enough to arouse the desire of many older women to protect her. The 2 were naturally Musian and Bairuoxi, who had just ridden the dragon bird of Yaokai Holy Land to Lianji sect half a day ago. Musian obviously noticed Yayu and looked over. Then, his dark eyes flickered slightly, and soon became as deep and calm as a pool of water. Yayu raised his head and looked up in the air, with a cold smile on his face. You didn't expect it, Musian. I'm still alive, and I know that you have an affair with the queen of the demon realm. He stared at Musian, wanting to see surprise, confusion, puzzlement, and even fear on Musian's face. But Musian always had a smile on his face, his expression was normal. He greeted Longke to land, and took the initiative to greet him, Brother, yeah, I haven't seen you for a long time, you seem to be in a lot worse complexion. Yeah, you showed a cold face, Musian, there are only you and me here, you don't have to be so secretive about what you want to say and what you want to do, it seems hypocritical. Musian suddenly said oh, turned his head and kissed Bairuoxi's pretty face. Bairuoxi gave Musian a resentful sidelong glance, then lowered her head and buried her face in his arms, looking well-behaved and sensible. Yayu's face was angry and he said, you. Seeing the cold and aloof Miss Bai now so well-behaved and gentle in Musian's arms, even though she had nothing to do with Bairuoxi, Yayu's chest was burning with nameless anger. Didn't you say that you can do whatever you want, without hiding it? Musian spread his hands innocently, then gently patted Lonkei's head, indicating that it could go. Yayu took a deep breath and exhaled slowly. This time is different from the last time. In Jiyuan, you want to kill me with the help of the Queen of the Demon Realm, but in Lianji sect, can the Queen of the Demon Realm still help you? No. Even the fact that Musian colluded with the Queen of the Demon Realm will be the last straw that overwhelms Musian. What's more, there is a spiritual consciousness of the Hedeo realm in his body. For this, he needs to win the alchemy competition and use the 8th grade elixir to nourish the spiritual consciousness in his body. When he thought of this, Yayu had completely calmed down. He clenched his fists and said coldly, see you in the alchemy competition. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 379. I didn't expect Yayu to be alive. It's a bit surprising. But his luck is like a candle in the wind after this time. If I can take this opportunity to get rid of him, maybe I can get a second share of the luck of the heaven. Musian rode the dragon bird all the way to Tianhe Garden, thinking about Yayu in his heart, and soon arrived at Tianhe Garden. Brother Mu. A crisp and pleasant voice came from the front of the villa. A girl in a purple skirt walked over like an elf, with a pure and sweet smile on her delicate face. The cold wind blew past, ripples in the pond, and also blew up the girl's skirt, and a small section of snow-white calves appeared vaguely. Sister Lingxian, why are you here? Musian said in surprise. Ya Lingxian walked over with a smile on her face, saying, Senior Lin Ling was bored alone, so she asked me to play a few games with her. After that, she looked up at the beauty in the palace skirt on the dragon bird, with a watery light in her eyes, and shouted crisply, Sister Ruoxi, you are really hard to pick up, Brother Mu. I wonder where you found him. I have been worried to death these days. Bairuoxi shook her head and smiled, it can't be called hard work. Mu Lang went to the Yaokai Holy Land for some things. I only learned about it not long ago. Senior Kingdi is also in the Yaokai Holy Land, but it seems that he is in seclusion for some reason. Ya Lingxian smiled and said oh, whispering to herself, it is indeed Kingdi who took Brother Mu away. She lowered her eyes inadvertently, and her beautiful face gradually lost expression, and turned a little cold. In the past, no matter how strong Bairuoxi was, she never said that she wanted to kidnap Brother Mu and enjoy him alone. As a result, Fairy Yao Meng took advantage of the time when they were all in the heavenly palace and took Brother Mu to the holy land of Yaokai without saying a word. Ya Lingxian closed her eyes slightly, and soon she let herself maintain her usual elegant posture, raised her head and said with a smile, Sister Kingdi has a strong personality. I was worried that Brother Mu would not be used to the holy land of Yaokai. Now I feel relieved to see that you are here well. As she said, she reached out and held Musian's hand, Brother Mu, you didn't get hurt this time when you went to Jiyuan. Musian shook his head and said, I'm fine, but, I still gained a lot from this trip to Jiyuan. Where's Jian'er? She doesn't know that Brother Mu is back, and she is accompanying Master in Daofeng, Ya Lingxian said. Bairuoxi rode on Lonkei, silently listening to the two people's conversation, with a hint of displeasure on her face. She pressed her skirt with both hands and carefully stretched out her feet as if she wanted to get off Lankei's back. Muzian noticed the movement behind him, turned his head and saw that Bairuoxi had tried several times but failed to get off Lankei's back, and couldn't help asking, "What's wrong?" Bairuoxi put her little hand on her lips, glanced at the ground at a long height from her, her beautiful eyes were moist, her face was embarrassed, and she said softly in a weak and lovely manner, "It's okay." Muzian immediately understood, raised his head and held her soft little hand, and said softly, "I'll pick you up, don't worry." Bairuoxi said softly, "Sorry, Ruoxi is really afraid of heights." Yes, yes, Mulang knows that although our Ruoxi flies thousands of feet high every day, she has some acrophobia and has no fighting power, so she is weak and helpless and needs Mulang to hold her to get down. Muzian smiled but said nothing. Muzian hugged Bairuoxi's waist and supported her hips with his other hand, allowing her to jump down from Lankei's back. Wrapped in Malang's warm breath, the weak Miss Bai was no longer afraid. She leaned against Malang's warm chest and whispered, "Sorry, I've caused trouble to Malang again. Fortunately, Senior Kingdi is not here, otherwise he would be angry again when he saw me and Malang being so close." Ya Lingxian looked at the two of them with her beautiful lilac eyes, and said pitifully, "Sister Kingdi is in the Hedao realm and has a strong personality. If she were here, we would have no way to deal with her even if she was angry." "Ah, yes, yes, only Sister Kingdi is in the Hedao realm, you are all weak and helpless little white rabbits, Sister Lingxian is ordinary and has no background, and Ruoxi does not have the spiritual consciousness of the Hedao realm in her body." Muzian led the two into the villa while silently complaining in his heart. AAA. At this time, Linglong suddenly poked his head out of the room, and a pair of bright red eyes looked at Muzian curiously. The black robe was slightly loose, and the fullness of the chest could be vaguely seen. The small hands grabbed the sleeves, and the wide sleeves fluttered. No matter how skilled the craftsmanship in this world is, it is impossible to carve such pure eyes. But when she walked out of the room, the fullness of the chest seemed to sway gently with the owner's movement. This girl can be said to have the purest heart in the world, but in addition, she also has an extremely sexy figure. "Sister Linling, it's rare to see you come out." Muzian smiled and took the initiative to greet. Linling walked out of the room in small steps, looked up and down at Muzian a few times, and her eyes showed a bit of thinking. AAA. A few big words appeared on the ground, "Your luck is much stronger than before." At the end of the conversation, under the gaze of Bairuoxi and Ya Lingxian, she hugged his head, and a light fragrance came over her, refreshing her heart. But then, Linling leaned down slightly and licked Muzian's face gently. Then, a few words appeared on the ground again, "Delicious luck." Can luck be described as delicious food? Muzian's face was almost buried in Linling's arms. She was dressed quite simply. She was half covered by a loose black robe, but her majestic chest could be vaguely seen. People's hearts. But this action of burying himself in her arms made Muzian realize how big the heart of this little sister Linling was. But at this moment, Ya Lingxian said at the right time, "Sister Linling, the game between you and me is not over yet, why don't we go back to the room to continue?" Linling pecked his head. AAA, but then, his eyes curiously looked at the dragon bird that was still staying in the villa. "Aa." She pointed at the huge dragon bird and made a confused sound. "That's not food, that's a mount from Yaokai Holy Land." Muzian immediately took 2 steps forward to block Linling's view, and then asked, "By the way, where is Sister Mengru?" "She is still packing her things in the yard. Yesterday someone came from Yaokai Holy Land and said they would take her to Yaokai, but I didn't expect you to come back today." When Ya Lingxian said this, he suddenly hesitated and asked, "Speaking of which, I heard before that you also went to Jiyuan and never came back. Could it be that?" Muzian shook his head, "He is still alive." Even he was a little surprised that Yu had reached such a point and was still alive, and even returned to the Lianji sect alive and kicking. But after this battle, his luck should have completely come to an end. Sister Linling, can I ask you a favor? Musian suddenly said. A. Linling, who was about to go to the yard to play chess with Ye Lingxian, stopped and turned to look at Musian suspiciously. You seem to be able to tell a person's luck without taking a test tablet, right? Musian asked. Linling nodded AAA, tilted her head, and looked at him in confusion. I would like to ask you to help me find out how a certain disciple in the sect is doing. I wonder if you are free now. Linling thought for a moment, nodded, but quickly shook her head. What does this mean? I am free, but not completely free, Mu Jian cursed in his heart and asked in confusion, Sister Linling, what does this mean? She is hungry now, so she wants to eat some snacks. Ye Lingxian acted as the translator. Musian thought for a moment, then nodded slightly and said with a smile, okay, then I'll get ready. Linling nodded absently, seeming to be quite obsessed with the dragon bird, still looking at it quietly. Meanwhile, on the other side. Seeing how angry you are, I guess that person today is the Musian you mentioned before, right? Shui Yi's calm and sweet voice came from the bottom of Ye Yu's heart. There was a bit of gentleness in her tone and her voice was soft. Ye Yu nodded and said in a cold voice, this person has done all kinds of evil. He stole my wife, deceived my two sisters, and even sowed discord between me and my ancestors. I will return to the Lianji sect this time just to be with me. He has an end. If I remember correctly, Musian seems to have the support of Hedeo power. Are you really confident? Shui Yi was wearing a red dress and was sitting in the void. There seemed to be a bit of worry in her tone, but more of it was speechless. Going to trouble a monk who has the support of the Hedeo realm for no reason, isn't this causing trouble for himself? Senior, I don't know. Dongzhou and the demon realm are world enemies. If the sect knew that Musian colluded with the queen of the demon realm and harmed fellow disciples, according to the sect's rules, he would be considered useless even if he did not die. There was a bit of sternness in Ye Yu's eyes, and he said solemnly, besides, it is my responsibility as a monk in Dongzhou to eliminate demons and protect the Tao. If we retreat just because there are people behind Musian, how can Ye have any dignity in the future, in the world? What he said was a righteous statement, but Ye Yu seemed to have never considered that he had also cooperated with the demon cultivator he mentioned. And if I have to say it, Shui Yi, as the fourth evil pillar of the southern wilderness, can also be regarded as a demon. As soon as these words came out, even Shui Yi felt a little more uncomfortable. But Ye Yu obviously didn't notice Shui Yi's silence, but said to himself, but I didn't expect that Musian would have returned to Lianji sect so soon. No. I have to take action first and report to the sect leader in person. This matter. After saying that, Ye Yu stood up and was about to leave the hall. However, at this moment, a sexy and melodious lazy voice suddenly came from the distance of the hall, it's so late, where are Mr. Ye planning to go? Ye Yu's footsteps obviously paused, and he subconsciously raised his head and saw the woman walking slowly from the darkness. Ye Yu hesitated for a moment. There was a special secret covering the other party's body, and he couldn't see his appearance at all. However, he always felt that this figure looked very familiar, as if he had seen it from a disciple in the sect. Looking at the woman slowly walking into the hall, Ye Yu's eyes flickered slightly and he subconsciously took half a step back. For some reason, he always felt that something was wrong with this woman. Who are you? Ye Yu asked in shock. If you must say it, I am also the chosen one. The woman stood still and smiled softly. The chosen one. Besides me, there are other chosen ones. Ye Yu's eyes became a little colder. What are you doing here? According to the will of heaven, I will recycle the fate of useless people, the woman said with a smile. Ye Yu's heart skipped a beat, as if he realized something. He raised his head suddenly. The woman raised her hand and grabbed Ye Yu, and black demonic energy seemed to be emanating from her body. Yayu suddenly stepped back and struck out with his palm. Boom! The two exchanged palms, and a mouthful of blood spurted out from Yayu's mouth, and the woman's secret technique seemed to peel off, revealing a pair of seductive eyes. Yayu raised his head and looked, then was stunned for a moment. He slowly opened his eyes, pointed at the woman in front of him, and exclaimed in shock, "It's you, it's you. Are you also the chosen one? What you up to?" Okay, stop shouting like that, it makes people's ears hurt. You are not the only chosen one in this world. Useless people don't need any luck." She pinched her eyebrows, and when she raised her eyes were full of disgust, as if she couldn't stand Yayu's nonsense. "What do you want to do? This is the Liangyi section. If I die, you will definitely be found out." Yayu retreated slowly. He noticed the undisguised murderous intention of this woman. Since he was still a little weak after his trip to Jiyuan, he definitely could not be her opponent. "Shuiyi, help me," Yayu roared in his heart, trying to arouse the Hedeo realm spiritual consciousness that he saved not long ago. However, at this time, the woman's mouth curved into a sexy curve, and she said in a soft and seductive voice, "Consider carefully whether you want to be my enemy. If you follow me, you will get a lot more benefits than following a fool." Shuiyi pondered for a long time, and finally remained silent. Seeing that the powerful Hedeo master he had just met today was completely silent, Yayu was heartbroken. He raised his hand and slapped it out. The spiritual energy in the space seemed to explode during the compression. Yayu, on the other hand, wanted to escape from the hall without looking back. At this time, a snap of fingers suddenly came from behind. Afterwards, the spiritual energy in the space gradually stabilized, and everything seemed to return to a state of absolute stillness. The woman stepped forward quietly with sexy and elegant steps. Snap! The teacup crashed to the ground, and a huge amount of luck surged into the hall, and all of that luck was plundered by the woman. "Let's get rid of them together. If we keep them, we will have long nights and dreams." Shuiyi's voice came from Naja. She used the gentlest tone and spoke the most inhumane and cold words, and slowly stretched out her palm in the direction of Yayu. "The night is getting dark." Musian rode on the spirit dragon and yawned lazily. "Sister Linling, is it really okay for me to ride on you like this? What if the sect master's sister gets angry when she knows that I am riding the sect-suppressing beast?" "AAA, Linling raised the huge dragon head and asked very straightforwardly. At the same time, a text appeared on the wooden board in Musian's hand, "So you want to come down? Then there's no need. After all, we've already ridden up." Musian looked towards a certain direction of Liuli Palace and said, "If I remember correctly, Yayu lives there. Can you see his luck here?" Linling lowered his head and glanced at the location where Yayu lived, and immediately said AAA. New words appeared on the wooden board, his luck turned black. Musian said oh and said to himself, "It seems like I don't need to put in much effort." In the past, when Yayu was still a man of great luck, he suffered many setbacks. Now, without the blessing of great luck, is it not easy to deal with him? Musian patted Linling's head gently and said, "In that case, let's go back first." Linling did not make any movement, but looked at Yayu's villa with suspicion. Then, she turned into a silver stream of light and led Musian towards Yayu's villa. "Sister Linling, what is this?" Musian hesitated for a moment, not understanding her operation. However, the moment the words just fell, Musian realized something. He looked up at the empty garden and said, "Sister Linling, are you sure Yayu is here? Why can't I feel any of his breath?" AAA Linling nodded confidently. Musian glanced at the words on the wooden board, his breath was still there, but he was gone. Musian's eyes flashed slightly and he stepped into the villa. The hall was in a mess, and Yayu's breath had long since disappeared. There are the breaths left by other people here. Musian stared at the empty hall and whispered to himself. Linling pointed to the wooden board she held in her arms. Musian glanced at the contents of the board, then froze for a moment, looked at Linling in disbelief, and said in surprise. Yayu's luck was swallowed up. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 380. After a brief moment of daze, Musian felt a chill in his heart. In addition to him, there was another person who could also devour the luck of others, and devoured Yayu's luck before him. My treasure hunting rat was intercepted by someone in advance. At this moment, even Musian was a little depressed. If I don't ask Naxi to comfort me tonight, I'm afraid I won't be able to sleep all night. Oh, it's better to let Sister Mengru come together, lie on Sister Mengru's beautiful legs, and let Ruoxi comfort me softly beside me. Thinking of this, Musian felt a little relieved. After a long silence, he slowly exhaled and said, "Can Sister Linling detect the other party's identity?" Musian thought that as a spirit dragon, he should be able to capture the identity of the person who attacked Yayu through the breath in this hall. However, Linling shook her head gently, with a bit of loss in her tone, and whispered "AAA" softly. She handed the wooden board to Musian. A powerful person of the same realm blocked the breath here, so it is difficult to capture. No, if it was a powerful person of the Hedeo realm, it would be impossible to enter Lianji sect quietly without being detected by the sect's formation. Musian muttered to himself, and a thought slowly flashed through his mind, a wisp of spiritual consciousness. Yayu is the chosen son of heaven. In the past, he accidentally saved a wisp of spiritual consciousness and let it hide in the ring. When entering Lianji sect, Yao Shan in his ring was not noticed by anyone, and entered Lianji sect safely. The formation did not isolate him. Maybe the person who killed Yayu may have a similar ring. The wisp of Hedeo spiritual consciousness in the ring wiped out the breath at the scene. Thinking of this, Musian used his spiritual consciousness to scan the hall again, and did not find anything abnormal here. In short, report this to the law enforcement hall, and then go back. After a brief thought, he immediately made a judgment in his heart. It's a pity that Yayu's luck failed to devour it. If the Tiansheng furnace can devour the luck of such a person with great luck, it may be possible to create a protagonist with great luck in the future. Or giving this luck to Sister Mengro can also reduce the bad luck of her body of misfortune again. When thinking of this, Musian couldn't help but feel a little more regretful. The moon was bright and the stars were sparse, and the glazed palace was as quiet and peaceful as usual. Musian rode on the back of the spirit dragon, went to the law enforcement hall to tell Yayu about it, and then returned to the quiet villa. By the way, Sister Linling, can you unlock the seal that Sister Qingdi left in my Tiansheng furnace? Musian suddenly asked. Linling looked at Musian for a few times, then shook her head. Even you can't do it? Linling pointed at Musian's natural furnace, and then pointed at the wooden board in her hand, on which it was written, "No slurping." That's what it says on the seal. Linling wrote and drew on the wooden board again, motioning to Musian to see. Musian was stunned. Sister Qingdi also wrote on the seal. I really didn't expect that Sister Qingdi was usually as kind as an older sister, but she also had such a strong side, and was quite naughty. This feeling is like converting a bus into a private car. Musian quickly gathered his thoughts, looked at the innocent and beautiful woman in front of him, and smiled gently. Anyway, I'm sorry to bother Sister Linling today. I'll prepare snacks for you tomorrow when I'm free. Linling raised her head, looked at Musian with shining eyes, and tilted her head. AAA, really? Silver hair was scattered, and a strand of hair on her head was raised, swaying slightly with the cold wind. Musian looked at her silently. This woman was different from anyone he knew. She didn't fight or compete. She always looked silly and cute. She would also be happy because of your casual words and actions. She was so happy just by saying that she would prepare snacks tomorrow. In many ways, she was quite easy to please. Musian reached out and gently smoothed the hair on her head, but it immediately stood up again after he pressed it down. Could this hair be the real body? Musian smiled and said, of course it's true, but it's getting late today. Sister Lin Ling should go back to her room early. Lin Ling nodded AAA, but then she remembered something and raised the wooden board again. You seem to be participating in the alchemy competition, so I will hand over the second portion of Heavenly Dao Qi to you after this. Musian was silent for a moment, and suddenly said, each portion of Heavenly Qi is enough to arouse the crazy pursuit of countless cultivators in this world. Sister Lin Ling will not regret giving me 2 portions of Heavenly Qi in a row. AAA. Lin Ling shook her head gently. Her smooth silver hair was scattered, and her red eyes looked particularly bright and moving under the thin moonlight. Her exquisite and tight figure was wrapped in a white-black robe. She stepped forward, gently stroked Musian's head, lowered her head and stared into Musian's eyes, opened her mouth for the first time, and whispered, you are a good child. I won't feel lonely when I'm with you. Musian looked at her silently, thinking that if I were a good child, I wouldn't have any thoughts about you. Although people shouldn't at least, but she is really too cute. After sending Lin Ling back to her room, Musian returned to his room, but happened to see Bairuoxi sitting on the bed at some point. She seemed to be meditating, her eyes slightly closed, and the room was filled with rich spiritual energy. Musian did not interrupt, but walked to a chair aside and sat down, and then naturally took the tea from Wei Mengru. You seem a little worried. What happened when you went to Yayu's place just now? Wei Mengru stood beside her at some point, her long curly hair hanging loosely, highlighting a face as delicate as ice and snow. Today she put on a black and red dress, and stepped on a pair of exquisite and small embroidered shoes. Cool temperament. Musian took a sip of tea, and then couldn't help but turn around and glance at Wei Mengru. Sister Mengru, don't you ask me why I came back from Yaokai. Wei Mengru shook her head and said calmly, no matter what, you will come back to pick me up. Musian raised his eyebrows and asked in surprise, are you so confident? Wei Mengru glanced at him contemptuously, although you are a half-hearted bug, you still keep your promise. Musian held Wei Mengru's soft little hand, made her sit beside him, and whispered, Yayu is dead. It's not surprising that he died. It would be better to say that he was able to live for such a long time purely because of the blessing of luck. Wei Mengru glanced at Musian, the appearance of Heavenly Dao when you went to Jiyuan, is it related to Yayu? Musian nodded slightly, heaven blessed Yayu, so he returned to the sect alive today, but he was wiped out of existence by the mysterious Hedao power in the section. When Musian said this, he was suddenly stunned. Yes, why didn't I think of that? Yayu is the chosen one, and his luck has not faded away. Why was he wiped out so easily? Even if Musian wants to deal with the chosen son, he needs to weaken the opponent's luck before he can do it. Even if the Queen of the Demon Realm took action before, according to the rules of heaven and earth, a ray of heavens will came to Juzhu and protected Yayu. As a result, Yayu died so easily today in Lianji sect. Maybe the luck is not being swallowed up, but transferred from one person to another. If that's the case, the person who kills Yayu is probably the third person chosen by heaven, Musian murmured to himself. In this way, the reason why Tiandao protected Yayu at that time was probably to facilitate the transfer of Yayu's luck to others, because Yayu had been completely abandoned by Tiandao. Yes, before Yayu died, there was already a second chosen son. If this speculation goes forward, it would not be surprising even if there is a third chosen son now. Are you okay? What are you talking to yourself about? Wei Mengru looked at the young master with some worry and asked softly tentatively. It's okay, I should have thought of it a long time ago. Heaven does not only choose one chosen one. After Yayu is abandoned by it, a new chosen one will inevitably appear. Musian breathed a long sigh of relief and put his arms around Wei Mengru's waist. Wei Mengru's delicate body suddenly tensed up and she scolded softly, "What are you doing all of a sudden?" When he said this, his eyes secretly glanced at the beauty in the palace skirt who was meditating behind him. "Keep your voice down. Sister Mengru doesn't want Ruoxi to hear her, right?" Musian deliberately leaned into Wei Mengru's ear and whispered. Wei Mengru's eyes flashed slightly, and she lowered her eyes in shame under Musian's burning gaze. However, even so, she still wanted to maintain her former aloof image, regrouping as if refusing to admit defeat, raised her eyes and stared at Musian. "Yayu is dead. You don't even know who attacked Yayu. Now the enemy is hiding and we are hiding. You are still thinking about such a thing." There seemed to be a bit of coldness in his tone, and he spoke to the young master in an educational tone. "It is precisely because the enemy is hiding us from the outside that we must increase our strength as soon as possible," Musian said seriously. Although she was held in the arms of the young master, the maid still curled her lips very harshly. "You are just a fourth-level god refiner. No matter how high your level is, it is impossible for you to improve much in a short time." But who would have thought that Musian would just give it up and say, "Ah, yes, my level is low, so I can only hope that Sister Mengru will be able to refine herself and return to the void as soon as possible. For this, my natural cauldron is indispensable." Wei Mengru immediately gave him a disgusted sideways glance, but the moment she met his eyes, she was like an electric shock. She looked away in panic and lowered her head silently. Musian took advantage of the situation to pursue him, reached into her dress and pinched the maid's slender waist, and said softly, "Sister Mengru has half-stepped into the realm of returning to the virtual world. How come she can't even suppress a fourth-level god refiner, can't live?" Wei Mengru rarely said anything this time. Because she was sitting on the young master's lap, she could naturally feel Musian's love, and a touching blush gradually appeared on her pretty face. "Is it okay?" Musian asked softly. Wei Mengru glanced at him faintly through her forehead. "You won't do anything if I say no?" "Of course it will happen." Musian made no secret, then looked at the maid's blushing face, leaned into her ear and whispered, "But I want to hear it from Sister Mengru's own words." The room was silent for a long time, and then a reply as thin as a mosquito's moan was heard. What? You should say yes or no," Musian continued to say persistently. The room was silent for an unknown period of time before the girl's voice was heard after hesitating for a long time, "Yes." Then, the room suddenly became quiet for a while. Wei Mengru came back to her senses as if she had just woken up from a dream, and raised her eyes as if she wanted to kill someone. "What did you make me say?" "Didn't you say all this yourself?" Musian smiled knowingly. Before Wei Mengru could speak again, Musian had already lowered his head to hold her red lips, and at the same time, it seemed that a strong spiritual energy was sent into Wei Mengru's body. After a while, Musian picked up Wei Mengru horizontally, and under her misty eyes, he walked towards the bed where Ruoxi was meditating. Wei Mengru finally came back to her senses and hurriedly whispered, "She's still meditating, so don't disturb her." "You don't think that Ruoxi will really meditate peacefully after making such a big noise, do you?" Musian said with a smile. As if she had heard the conversation between the two, Ruoxi slowly opened her beautiful eyes, looked at Musian faintly, and whispered, "Malang is getting bolder and bolder." Musian held Wei Mengru's little hand with one hand, and put the other hand on the back of Ruoxi's hand, and said naturally, "I just hope to improve your cultivation as soon as possible in my own way. Even if I'm tired and suffer a little, it doesn't matter." Het. Ruoxi and Wei Mengru sneered almost at the same time, looking at him with contempt in their eyes. But under this contemptuous look, there seemed to be a hint of shyness. "Did Malang go to the law enforcement hall today to inform Yayu about it?" Ruoxi suddenly asked softly. "Of course I have been there. They have already started investigating, although I don't think they can find out anything. Musian blew out the candle with a flick of his finger, and took the two beauties into his arms, pulled up the quilt, and buried himself in Bairuoxi's arms. But it doesn't matter. Bairuoxi was a little puzzled, tilted his head slightly, and looked at him puzzledly. Why do you think so? The existence of the chosen son will meet me under the guidance of the heavenly way. Even if I don't go to find the other party will find a way to find me. Musian took Waimengru's little hand and let her lie down next to Bairuoxi. Looking at the two beauties on the bed, he grinned leisurely and said, "We can just wait here." That day, the bed rocked all night. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 381. Early in the morning. In an elegant garden located on the south bank, Nanjiati, the holy son of the southern wilderness, was using his spiritual energy to refine the elixir in the cauldron in front of him. Not far from Nanjiati, the elder of Nanhuang clasped his hands behind his back and watched the sky at night. Although you were unable to participate in the competition at the Immortal Ascension Conference this time, what you are good at is not competing with others, but refining alchemy. The old man smiled and looked at the medicine emanating from the cauldron in front of Nanjiati. Fragrance, smiled and said, "Both I and the elders in our southern wilderness have great trust in your alchemy methods." Nanjiati was dressed in a mysterious robe, carefully injecting spiritual energy into the cauldron, and said with a smile, "The disciples must bear in mind what the elder said. In this alchemy competition, the disciples will do their best." The old man nodded. Yuzhou is the holy land for alchemists, and the queen of Yuzhou is the emperor of alchemy. Anyone in these 9 states will have to show some respect to her. If you can win this time, not only can you get an 8th grade elixir, but you can even get her appreciation and go to Yuzhou to study for a few years. Whether it is for the 8th grade elixir or for yourself, when this competition is of great significance to you. I will do my best to win this competition, Nagati said. The old man nodded with satisfaction and stopped talking. Instead, he observed the elixir in the cauldron, and then whispered, "The elixir of the 6th grade is close to the 7th grade. An elixir approaching the 7th level can be said to be almost invincible among its peers. Except for alchemy geniuses like Nanjiati, few people can do it." Hearing this, Nanjiati couldn't help but reveal a somewhat proud smile on his face, and said, "This elixir is called Guji Dan, and it is perfect for monks in the realm of refining gods to take. I have conducted several experiments during this period. It was barely refined until today." When the old man heard this, the smile on his face became much stronger. In this Ascension Conference, Saintess Regina of the Southern Wilderness fought to the end. Although she was defeated by Lan Mulian, it was enough. After all, for a monk from the Void Return realm to participate, it would be a disaster for the God-refining realm. As for Nanjiati, although they were unable to participate in the Immortal Ascension Conference, if they could win the 8th grade elixir in the alchemy competition, this time, a small part of their goal would be accomplished. "By the way, Elder, is there any news about Master Shuiyi now?" Nanjiati asked suddenly. The smile on the old man's face faded slightly, and he shook his head slowly. "There has never been any news. I originally thought that the big commotion in Jiyuan was because of Lady Shuiyi, but later I heard that it seemed to be related to the Queen of the Demon Realm." Nanjiati thought thoughtfully and said softly, "Sir Shuiyi left the southern wilderness alone in search of a way to ascend to heaven. It has been tens of thousands of years since she left. The original tribe members seemed to think she had fallen, but they did not expect that she's still alive. Lord Shuiyi is the most powerful god in the southern wilderness. Naturally, he cannot fall easily, but he may be trapped somewhere in the East continent. What we have to do this time is to find her traces. The rest will be done by the 3 great masters." As long as you can handle it. When the old man said this, he seemed to have thought of something, and continued, by the way, if you find it difficult to win the competition in 3 days, you can put this medicinal material into the cauldron, and you will definitely win the championship. He took out a dark blue flower from his cuff. There seemed to be a baby's face on the flower, which looked quite strange. Nagiati was slightly startled and said in surprise, 100 refined flour. The so-called Balianhua is a special medicinal material that has been refined 100 times. If this flour is added to any elixir, the aura of the elixir will overflow, and the quality of the elixir will be increased by half. And this half level, for high-end alchemists, is often enough to determine the winner. The 8th grade elixir contains an emperor-level medicinal material. Only Empress Luton is willing to use it as a reward for the alchemy competition. This competition is not only for you, but also for the saint. The old man patted Nagiati's shoulder gently and whispered, "Don't let me and the saint down." Nagiati's eyes became a little more fiery, and he raised his hands and bowed, "Disciple, accept the order." Musian slowly opened his eyes, feeling the slight fatigue in his body, but he breathed a long sigh of relief. He turned his head slightly and looked at Bairuoxi, who was sleeping soundly. He then turned his head and glanced at the maid behind him, and couldn't help but reveal a faint smile of satisfaction. There is more than one chosen one in this world, but without exception, no matter which one is chosen, there will definitely be countless stepping stones on his way to practice. And Musian is just a stepping stone, at least that's what Musian always thought when he was in Tianqian City. However, it now seems that although he is a stepping stone in front of the chosen son, he is also the biggest stepping stone. Therefore, if the chosen son wants to continue on the path of cultivation, he will inevitably need to use this biggest stepping stone. Move away. For this reason, even if Musian does not provoke the other party will encounter him somewhere. But now, Musian doesn't have much feeling about the chosen one. After all, he came here when he was alone, let alone now. After developing for such a long time, although his own realm has not improved much, at least the protagonists around him are on the verge of returning to the void. Wei Mengru was only one step away from being able to refine her spirit and return to the void. Although Bairuoxi is still one level behind, she is getting closer. Add to that the three-tailed fox's physical strength. If she can get the Tegzapil, her future is limitless. For this reason, it's almost time for him to take action. 2 days passed unknowingly. In these 2 days, Musian not only helped the protagonists around him to improve their strength, but also went to the library to chat with Yan Ruyu and ask about the method of alchemy. "I've never seen you have any interest in alchemy in the past, why are you so interested in it these days? Are you also planning to participate in the alchemy competition after the Ascension Conference?" Yan Ruyu, dressed elegantly and beautifully, sat in the side hall, wrapped in a black robe with a sexy and mature body, looking at Musian with a smile. Her skin was white and tight, and there was a gentle light in her eyes. She was at the age when women were the most plump and full, and she had a mature charm that a girl never had. There is no threshold requirement for the alchemy competition. After all, the threshold for becoming an alchemist is already very high. It just so happens that my disciple also meets the requirements of an alchemist. I think I might as well give it a try since I have nothing to do, Musian said with a smile. He could not have become an alchemist, but his chaotic body contained the constitution of a natural spirit body, and a natural spirit body is one of the most suitable constitutions for becoming an alchemist. Yan Ruyu, with a gentle smile, said immediately, "That's not bad. You can also take participating in the alchemy competition as a training. But, in addition to the alchemy competition, you also need to pay attention to your own cultivation." Musian naturally nodded very sincerely and said, "Disciple will definitely remember it in my heart." The two chatted for a while, and Musian suddenly asked, "By the way, Master was trapped in the bottleneck of returning to the void for many years. Is it now? Thanks to the immortal fate given by the Green Emperor, the bottleneck has been broken now. Yanruya glanced at him charmingly and said, if it weren't for you, I think Senior Green Emperor would probably not have given the immortal fate to Lianji section. At the end, her expression became a little more complicated. At the beginning, she chose Musian more because of Musian's natural furnace, but what about Musian? But I have been thinking about my incompetent teacher. When Yanruya thought of this, she couldn't help but sigh softly and said, when I think about it carefully, I really feel sorry for you. I didn't choose you just because of your talent. And I didn't give you much help, but I was attracted by your. As soon as he finished speaking, Musian suddenly stretched out his index finger and gently pressed it against Yanruyu's red lips, and smiled gently. In fact, I know some things even if the teacher doesn't say it. Yanruyu was slightly stunned. You mean? You know things, maybe the disciples also know, but they just don't mind it, Musian smiled. Hearing this, Yanruyu was silent for a while, and then, a trace of tenderness appeared in her eyes, and she took out a jade slip that looked simple and unremarkable from her sleeve. This jade slip records the alchemy experience of many alchemists in the past. You can crush it, and those experiences will naturally enter your mind, but how much you can learn depends on yourself. The number of such jade slips that can directly integrate their memories into the brain is very small, and it is extremely difficult to refine. Musian naturally knows the preciousness of this jade slip, and immediately raised his hands and bowed, "Thank you, Master." Yanruyu's attitude made Musian feel a little embarrassed. After all, he got so many things from Yanruyu for free. But Yanruyu is not in a bottleneck period at the moment, and he doesn't need his help for the time being. If there is a need in the future, even if he sacrifices himself, Musian doesn't mind it. After all, several heads, especially his master, treat him very well, and have given him too many favors since he joined the sect. After talking with Yanruyu for a while, Musian saw that it was getting late, so he said goodbye at the right time, left the hall, and went straight to Dexon Garden. Windproof curtains were hung at the four corners of the pavilion, and a charcoal fire was burning in the pavilion, dispelling the coldness of this winter. In the curtain, Musian vaguely saw a young lady with a classical and elegant temperament. She was wearing a purple dress with colorful patterns. Musian concealed his breath and quietly approached behind Ye Lingxian. He opened the curtain and found that the girl was holding a thin book in her hand. Her cheeks were flushed, but her eyes were shining as she stared at the book. She looked shy but wanted to read, as if she was secretly reading some unhealthy book. Musian was about to get closer to see what the girl was reading so attentively, but when he approached, the familiar warm breath woke Ye Lingxian from her trance and turned her head sharply. Seeing a handsome face, Ye Lingxian subconsciously moved back, holding the book, her pretty face flushed, looking at Musian angrily and nervously. "Brother Mu, why did you come here without telling me? You scared me." Musian looked at the book in Ye Lingxian's hand for a few times, and saw that she covered the book tightly, and couldn't help laughing. "Aren't you born with a spirit? I wanted to tease you secretly before, but you noticed it? Why did you get scared by me today? Also, what book are you reading that you are so absorbed in reading?" Ye Lingxian glanced at him, blushed and put the book on her thigh, covering the title of the book, and snorted, "I won't tell you. By the way, Brother Mu, why did you have time to come to me today? Did you think of me because you are no longer interested in Sister Ruoxi?" At the end, she could not help but glance at him faintly. Musian smiled helplessly and said, "I just want to chat with you. However, since you are not very welcome, I will visit you next time." After that, he stood up and wanted to leave. Ye Lingxian ignored him and turned away to maintain her reserve. Until she saw that Musian was really going to leave the villa, Ye Lingxian bit her lips subconsciously and silently grasped the desolate time lock in her sleeve. The next moment, the desolate time lock directly turned into a golden light and swept towards Musian. Less than a few seconds later, the tied Musian was thrown back into the pavilion by the desolate time lock. Sorry, the desolate time lock doesn't seem to want Brother Mu to go back so soon. Ye Lingxian showed an elegant smile. She gently raised her fingertips and let the desolate time lock untie Musian's restraints. I pretended to believe it. Musian came to Ye Lingxian and sniffed, saying, "Did you just take a shower? It smells like rose milk." Ye Lingxian's pretty face suddenly turned red, and she glared at the teasing boy, changing the subject. "Brother Mu came to see me, is it for the alchemy competition?" Musian put his arm around Ye Lingxian's thin shoulders, looked at the girl's blushing face, and smiled. "In fact, it's not just for the alchemy competition, but mainly to see you and Qian'er." Ye Lingxian lowered her eyes, and her slender fingers stroked the book in her hand. It seemed that a word "you" could be vaguely seen on it. She whispered, "Qian'er has been working hard to practice since she failed in the last Ascension conference. She should still be in the room now." After a pause, she looked at Musian suspiciously and said, "Brother Mu is not planning to participate in the alchemy competition for Sister Ruoxi's Tegzapil, right?" "How do you know everything?" Musian was a little surprised. "Because it's Brother Mu's business, I know a little bit about it." Ye Lingxian smiled faintly. It seems that only at this time will Ye Lingxian become the elegant lady of the past, as if she is in control of everything. It seems that even if Sister Lingxian is in Lianji sect, she still has some intelligence network of her own. Musian was silent in his heart. The forbidden area can't reach into Lianji sect, but for a daughter like Ye Lingxian who has been loved by the Lord of the forbidden area since childhood, the forbidden area will naturally send people to protect her secretly. As long as the forbidden area does not disturb the disciples of Lianji sect, Lianji sect will turn a blind eye. "Does Sister Lingxian know about alchemy?" Musian asked. Ye Lingxian glanced at him faintly. Brother Mu is really for Sister Ruoxi's matter. At the end, he felt jealous inexplicably. Before she knew Musian, Ye Lingxian had always been an elegant and reserved little beauty. When she saw Musian, she was very polite and called him Master Mu. Even after she established a relationship with Musian, she always maintained the attitude of a young lady. However, when she heard that Musian was busy with the Tegzapil, she felt inexplicably jealous. "That's because Ruoxi needs the Tegzapil. If it was my Lingxian who needed this pill today, I would also find a way to get it for you." Musian held her soft hand and said softly. "That's what she said, but who knows if it's true." Ye Lingxian frowned and said softly. However, a pair of pure and bright peach blossom eyes bloomed with joy and shyness. Under Musian's expectant gaze, she pretended to be indifferent and said, "The so-called alchemy is actually not difficult to understand. To put it bluntly, it is to control the cauldron, inject one's own spiritual energy into the elixir, and adjust the temperature to refine the elixir." Musian suddenly realized, in this case, the most important thing in alchemy is the quality of one's own spiritual energy and the ability to control spiritual energy. "It's a pity that I was born with a spiritual energy in the cauldron that I can't actively use, otherwise, wouldn't I be able to refine the highest quality elixir every time?" Musian couldn't help feeling a little regretful. If you participate in the alchemy competition temporarily, you can't get a good ranking no matter how you think about it. Brother Mu thinks alchemy is too simple. Ye Lingxian paused and continued, "But I am also interested in the alchemy competition dash." At the end, she deliberately prolonged the tone and glanced at Musian inadvertently. The charcoal fire was burning in the pavilion, and her long eyelashes caught the light, and her pointed oval face seemed to be stained with a warm glow. She raised her chin slightly, with a fair and beautiful oval face, a pure and elegant posture, and continued seriously, "Since Brother Mu also wants to participate in the alchemy competition, then just stay in Dexinuyuan for a few days, so it will be more convenient to discuss." Musian looked at her in shock. Sister Lingxian usually doesn't fight or compete, but I didn't expect that she would have such a domineering side. But after thinking for a while, Musian nodded gently and accepted Ye Lingxuan's suggestion. Yes, there are only a few days before the alchemy competition. If you and I study together in the next few days, it will be much more useful than me working alone. Ye Lingxian smiled sweetly, but soon worriedly said, if Sister Ruoxi knew that Brother Mu was always by my side, would she be angry? Musian shook his head and smiled. It doesn't matter, I will explain it to her clearly. With such a big heart as Naxi, she still has some tolerance. After all, this alchemy competition is for her Tegzupil. By the way, there is something I need to remind Brother Mu. Ye Lingxian seemed to have remembered something, and suddenly said, even I can't guarantee that I can win the alchemy competition, so if Brother Mu plans to participate, he must also make corresponding preparations. If Brother Mu really wants the Tegzupil so much, I will think of a way for you later. These words coming from the mouth of the Forbidden Area Saint are naturally very convincing. Musian gently stroked Ye Lingxuan's hair and whispered, don't worry, no matter whether the alchemy competition wins or loses, I will have a way. If the Tiansheng furnace is exchanged for the Tegzupil, it doesn't seem to be too bad. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 382. That night. The so-called alchemy depends on one's own control of spiritual energy, and also pays attention to the quality of spiritual energy. No wonder there are so few alchemists in Zhuzhou. Musian looked at the dark cauldron in front of him, and a second-grade pill slowly floated out of the cauldron, and said to himself thoughtfully. Sister Lingxian, where is the pill you made? It won't fail, right? Musian asked again. Ye Lingxian glanced at Musian, stretched her waist lazily, and the light purple dress wrapped around the girl's delicate body. The white neck outlined a graceful arc, and the naturally scattered hair set off the beautiful face like white porcelain. She circulated her spiritual energy and stretched out her hand in the direction of the cauldron. The rich smell of medicine emanated from the cauldron, and a fifth-grade pill fell into Ye Lingxuan's hands. Although I don't usually make pills, it's impossible for an outsider like Brother Mu to compete with me. Ye Lingxian slightly raised her snow-white chin, her eyes were arrogant, and she maintained the demeanor of a young lady. For the same pill, the quality of the pill made by controlling the spiritual energy may be 1 or 2 grades different, Ye Lingxian said. After explaining with a tone as if she was educating others, Ye Lingxian glanced at the night outside the window. It's getting late, Brother Mu should rest early today. At the end of the speech, Ye Lingxian gently covered her rosy mouth with her green hands and yawned a little. Cultivators will also feel tired, and the easiest way to get tired is to meditate or sleep, and most cultivators usually choose the former. I'll go back to the room with Sister Lingxian. Musian came forward, held Ye Lingxuan's little hand, and stared at the flawless face of the little beauty. Ye Lingxuan's cheeks were slightly red, but she gently pulled out her hand and said modestly, today's alchemy consumed a lot of spiritual energy. Lingxian is really tired. Brother Mu must not be much better. Let's find an empty room here to stay. Musian was stunned. Ye Lingxian tiptoed slightly, put her pretty face in front of Musian, and kissed him gently on the face. Good night, Brother Mu. By the way. Ye Lingxian stopped and said again, if Brother Mu goes back tonight, I will be angry. Not letting me hum and not letting me find someone else. Musian came back to his senses in a trance and nodded slightly. Well, it's late today, so let's go to bed early. Thinking about it, it doesn't matter if I don't practice dual cultivation for the time being. It's more important than anything else to make good use of alchemy in the next few days. After all, this is all for Foxier Mother. The next evening. In the alchemy room, the pills in the cauldron had already cooled down, and the aroma of medicine in the room was extremely strong, refreshing. Brother Mu's level of alchemy is much higher than before. If he had started to make pills when he was in Tianxian City, he would probably be a 5th grade alchemist now. Ye Lingxian stretched out her palm and looked at the round 2nd grade pill in her hand. Her eyelashes like a small brush trembled, and there was a faint smile on her face. I didn't know that alchemy was so interesting in the past, otherwise I would have gone to ask the guest of my Mu family for advice earlier. Musian took the 2nd grade pill he made and smiled. Unexpectedly, Ye Lingxian chuckled. In the past, Brother Mu was obsessed with beauty. He went to the music bureau every now and then or flirted with the girl next door. How could he have time to make pills? Even practicing was not a common thing. Musian raised his eyebrows slightly and maintained a smile. That was just because I didn't know my sister Lingxian at that time. When he said this, he stretched his hand to her slender waist. Ye Lingxuan's pretty face blushed slightly, but her body moved to the side 2 steps to avoid Musian's palm. Sorry, I'm too tired from making pills these days. Lingxian can't accompany Brother Mu today. It's better to meditate and practice early. At the end, she tiptoed and whispered in Musian's ear, since Brother Mu is preparing for the alchemy competition, it's better to stop these thoughts for the time being. Let's talk about it after the alchemy competition is over. Musian. Even he could roughly see at this moment that Ye Lingxian was deliberately teasing his appetite. Who did she learn bad things from? It was never like this before, Musian muttered in his heart, feeling a little depressed, but still maintained a gentle smile like a neighbor's brother. In that case, let's stop here today. I can bear it, but I don't believe you can bear it forever. The spiritual energy in the natural furnace is extremely tempting for female cultivators, especially now that he is absorbing the spiritual energy in the heavenly court. For cultivators, the spiritual energy in the heavenly court is an irresistible temptation. I really didn't expect that I would be banished to the cold palace one day. Musian sighed and continued to refine pills in the alchemy room. At the same time, on the other side, the candlelight in the room was bright. Ye Qian supported herself on the bed with both hands, raised her bright eyes and stared at the girl in the purple skirt, and whispered, "Sister, is it really okay for you to treat Brother Mu like this?" Ye Lingxian sat on the chair with a dignified posture, her legs together, her feet in light purple embroidered shoes swaying under her skirt, and she used a knife to cut the papaya in her hand. She glanced at her sister and said lightly, "People like Brother Mu should be teased first, and they can't be given so easily. Look at this." Ye Lingxian took out a book from the ring and threw it on Ye Qian's bedside. Ye Qian tilted his head slightly, with a bit of doubt in his eyes. "Is this?" "Sister Ruoxi lent it to me a few days ago. It contains a lot of things about men, and some." There was a slight pause in the action of peeling the papaya. Ye Lingxuan's face was on fire. After hesitating for a moment, he whispered, "And some special ways to play." Ye Qian looked at the book in his hand, nodded thoughtfully, and then asked, "Why does my sister often eat papaya during this period?" "It stands to reason that the refining realm has already gone away from grain, so it doesn't matter whether you eat or not." "Right." Ye Lingxian glanced at her sister, who had a pure face but an extremely sexy figure, and said quietly, "You don't understand, don't ask so many questions." Time passed quickly, and another day passed in the blink of an eye. The story of the alchemy competition also spread throughout the sect, attracting the attention of countless monks. The Empress of Yuzhou decided to stay in Lianji sect for a few more days, and took out the 8th grade elixir as a reward for the alchemy competition. 8th grade elixirs require at least one emperor-level medicinal material to be refined, and even if a powerful Hedao master can have just 3 or 2 of them, it's already pretty good. As the alchemy competition approached, this news soon ignited the entire Lianji sect, and many disciples who knew how to alchemy were even more excited. "You know, this is a living Hedao realm empress, and she is also an extremely rare alchemist. Only the medicine emperor Luotan, who created the immortal dynasty, was willing to do such a big undertaking. If he could win her favor in the subsequent alchemy competition, it would be an exaggeration to say that he would rise to the top. After all, what monks lack most in cultivation are resources. With resources, you can speed up your cultivation. The same two monks with abundant resources and those with few resources can practice 3 times faster. The cultivation resources are somewhat scarce even for the ancient family. Under normal circumstances, if the resources of an ancient family were invested in cultivating disciples in the return to Void Realm, it would be extremely difficult to train 2 or 3. After all, refining elixirs requires medicinal materials, and those alchemists are not always successful in refining elixirs. It is not easy to refine one pill from the same 3 ingredients. But for Empress Luotan, such pills are as random as beans. After all, she is one of the top alchemists in the world. Just imagine, if the alchemist is lucky enough to be selected by her this time and become an exchange student in Yuzhou, he will be in her dormitory every day and feed you a few pills every now and then. The future will definitely be limitless. And because he is a direct disciple, if he is lucky, he might be able to develop a relationship with her again. Of course, this is actually a bit too much to think about. After all, what genius has not seen the Empress in the past? If he really wanted to take a fancy to a young monk, he should have taken a fancy to him before, and he wouldn't have waited until now. But no matter what, even if you can't develop an intimate relationship with the other party in depth, with the status of master and apprentice, you can go sideways in Kyushu in the future. It's a pity that the spiritual energy in the natural furnace cauldron cannot be directly converted into elixirs. Otherwise, even if I cannot refine high-grade elixirs, I will definitely make the elders who are responsible for judging the quality of elixirs excited, and even Luotan. In the alchemy room, Musian looked at the cauldron in front of him and whispered to himself, feeling somewhat regretful. But then, he quickly thought of something, and said to himself, although I can't actively use the spiritual energy in the natural furnace, my own cauldron now also contains the spiritual energy of heaven. Although it is less powerful than the natural furnace, the spiritual energy is 2 to 3 times worse, but with the help of alchemy, the quality will definitely be superior. You must know that the spiritual energy in heaven is extremely special. Even if it absorbs only part of it, it is enough to break through its own bottleneck. However, the road to immortality has not been revealed, and if you want to absorb the spiritual energy of heaven, you need to meet the conditions of heaven. And this condition is too harsh. Just the first requirement, which requires the Hedeo realm to enter, has already screened out 99% of the monks. Except for a few heavenly auras given to a group of disciples who participated in the assessment during Yekingzen's Cave Heaven assessment, there has never been any heavenly aura in Kyushu. If this extremely rich heavenly spiritual energy is injected into the refined elixir, what will happen? Musian's eyes fell on the cauldron in front of him. In the cauldron, a pale white pill was suspended in mid-air. This is a second-grade elixir, a small return elixir. People who take this elixir can recover from minor injuries within 1 day. If we only used the Xiaohuan as the elixir for the competition, we would naturally be a million miles away. Musian closed his eyes slightly, holding his breath and concentrating. The extremely rich heavenly spiritual energy in the Tian cauldron emitted a faint colorful light, and quietly merged into the Xiaohuan along with the operation of Musian's cauldron. Click. Only a slight cracking sound was heard, and then, dense cracks appeared on the surface of Xiaohuan. Then with a bang sound, the Xiaohuan completely shattered. Sure enough, ordinary elixirs cannot withstand the spiritual energy of heaven. Musian sighed softly. But then, he briefly recalled it and said to himself, if I abandon the medicinal properties of Xiaohuan and just strengthen the hardness of the medicine, I wonder if I can withstand the spiritual energy of heaven. Thinking of this, Musian quickly took out another small Huandan medicinal material from Naja, and then took out a Huangji root. According to the jade slip he crushed not long ago, although Huangji root is a medicinal material, it is usually used to embellish weapons, making the weapons indestructible. Under normal circumstances, refining any elixir does not require the use of Huangji root. Muzian turned the cauldron again, used his spiritual consciousness to condense the Xiaohuan, and then threw the Huangji root into the cauldron. After nearly half an hour, Huangji root completely covered the surface of Xiaohuan, turning the originally pale white medicine into a deep silver color. Muzian activated the heavenly aura in his body and carefully injected the heavenly aura into the Xiaohuan. After one stick of incense, the deep silver color on the surface of Xiaohuan quietly changed, from the original silver color to a faint color. The extremely rich medicinal fragrance mixed with the aura of heaven filled the entire alchemy room. Muzian did not dare to relax and continued to inject heavenly spiritual energy. After half a quarter of an hour, the little return pill was finally fully formed, and Muzian breathed a sigh of relief, wiped the sweat from his forehead, took out the little return pill from the cauldron, and put it into his mouth. The rich heavenly aura filled his whole body almost instantly, and then, there was a thunderous sound in the sky. The bottleneck of the fourth level of God refining has been broken through. Sure enough, it is feasible. This little return pill is equivalent to being transformed by the spiritual energy of heaven. It has a beneficial effect on monks below the enlightenment level. Muzian was quite pleasantly surprised. He looked at the cauldron, which was cracked due to the inability to withstand the spiritual energy of heaven, with an interesting smile on his face. If so, it doesn't seem to matter what level of alchemist I am. In the next day, Muzian was in the alchemy room, conducting repeated experiments, and determined that no matter what elixir was refined, it would be indestructible as long as it was added with the Huangji root, and if it was supplemented by the spiritual energy of heaven, any elixir the medicine will change and become a special elixir containing the spiritual energy of heaven. Before we knew it, the day of the alchemy competition came. Muzian woke up alone in the room, yawned lazily, and got out of bed to change clothes. "Brother Mu, are you okay there?" Ya Lingxuan's voice came from outside the house, and Muzian hummed, opened the door, and saw the classical and quiet little beauty. The complicated and gorgeous long skirt wraps her delicate body, her hair has been neatly combed with hairpins, and she is wearing a pair of small embroidered shoes, which outlines the beauty of the girl's upright youth. Where does the papaya smell come from? Muzian felt doubtful for a moment, and then he moved closer to Ya Lingxian. There seemed to be a faint fragrance coming out of her dress, mixed with the fragrance of papaya. "Mu, what are you doing, brother Mu?" Ya Lingxuan's eyes flashed with a hint of shyness, and she turned her face away. Muzian reached out to hold her soft little hand, lowered his head slightly, and whispered softly in her ear, "You might as well let me help you eat papaya faster." Although she lived in Dexingyuan for the past 2 days, Ya Lingxian did not give him a chance to get close to her at all. Every time she wanted to kiss Fangs after practicing elixirs at night, she would make excuses to sneak away. Muzian is also very patient. In other words, he has not had a good rest during this period, so it would be good to take this opportunity to rest. And he also wanted to see whether Sister Lingxian was more tolerant or whether he was more patient. Let her move on her own then. When Ya Lingxian heard Muzian's words of help, she blushed and lowered her head. "I just ate some fruit," brother Mu misunderstood. Muzian let out an "oh," seeing through it without saying anything. He just said nonchalantly, "Actually, my sister Lingxian is not young anymore, so this is just right." Although Ya Lingxian cannot be said to have great ambitions, her development scale is indeed not bad, but compared to Qian'er or Ruoxi, it has become a disappointing story. But little did she know that although being big was good, being small also had its benefits. Muzian quickly stopped his teasing and said, "Today is the alchemy competition. Considering that we haven't been to Canghai Peak for a while, let's go and have a look in advance." Ya Lingxian nodded slightly, then seemed to remember something, and handed a ring to Muzian. "By the way, brother Mu, this is for you." Muzian used his spiritual sense to scan Naja, and soon there was a subtle look on his face. The high-end cauldron? If I remember correctly, this cauldron would cost at least 800,000 spiritual stones in the auction house, and it's priceless, right? Muzian declined politely. If I accept this cauldron, wouldn't I become a freeloader? Yalingxian frowned slightly, a little unhappy. Brother Mu has helped me so much, what does a cauldron mean? Brother Mu, instead of worrying about this, why not find a way to spend more time with Jianer and me? When he said it at the end, his voice was much softer, and his beautiful peach blossom eyes shone with shyness. Muzian pondered for a moment, then accepted the ring and said with a smile, "That's fine. After returning from the alchemy competition, I will try my best to please Sister Lingxian." He leaned into Yalingxuan's ear and whispered, "When I come back, I will replace Papaya and help Sister Lingxian." Yalingxian glared at him and said softly, "Get out." Muzian was startled, "Can you scold me a few more words?" Yalingxian. Yalingxian gave Muzian an angry look as if she was looking at a pervert. "By the way, Brother Mu, have you decided what elixir you want to refine?" Yalingxian asked suddenly. "Certainly." Muzian showed a mysterious smile, "The prescription I invented myself." Even the quiet and elegant Miss Ye didn't believe it, she just laughed. A person who has just been involved in alchemy for a long time said that he invented a new elixir, haha. Muzian maintained a mysterious smile and did not intend to explain. Anyway, she will know as long as she goes to the alchemy platform at Kanghai Peak later. On the top of Kanghai Peak is an alchemy platform. In fact, not only Kanghai Peak, but also several of the 9 main peaks have alchemy platforms. In the past, sect disciples and even sect elders often went to the alchemy platform to refine alchemy. Luo Tan, who was wearing a long white dress, was sitting in an attic on the main peak, holding a cup of tea in her hand and looking casually at the endless stream of monks near the alchemy platform. On the alchemy stage, there are many contestants gathered here at this moment, including the Holy Son of the Southern Wilderness, the Saint of the World Sea and others. The private rooms in this attic are also full of monks. Most of the monks are not born with alchemy, but this does not hinder their interest in the alchemy competition. More importantly, even for ancient families, alchemists are extremely rare. As for those who were able to participate in the alchemy competition this time, except for some who had the support of big families, most of the sect disciples did not have much power behind them. This alchemy competition is also convenient for them to extend an olive branch to some people based on the performance of these alchemists, inviting them to join their family in the future, or invite them to become guests. If Luo Tan hadn't guided this alchemy competition from behind, it would have been really difficult for so many geniuses to gather here. Experts watch the door, laymen watch the excitement, it's the same no matter where you are. Who do you think will win this competition? The maid on the side stepped forward to refill Luo Tan's tea, then looked at the elegant empress and asked softly. Luotan's black silk stockings sit with her legs crossed. Her gorgeous white skirt is trimmed with gold threads and printed with blooming flowers, which further accentuates her luxurious temperament. She played with the teacup in her hand and said calmly, "The alchemy level of monks of this age is roughly the same. The highest level of the elixir they can refine should be around the 6th grade. If you want to win, it depends on the details. If it is the ability to control the spiritual energy and the spiritual energy, the quality is high enough and you can win if you think about it." "Is this why your majesty thinks so highly of the forbidden saint?" the maid said respectfully. "Natural spirits have an innate affinity for spiritual energy. Yalingxuan's physique is very suitable for both cultivation and alchemy. Moreover, she is also low-key enough, neither arrogant nor impatient. She is an excellent seedling." Luo Tan held the teacup and turned his head slightly to look at the alchemy platform outside the attic and the group of young monks in front of the alchemy platform. He continued, "However, it is not certain whether she will participate in the competition. The forbidden saint has no shortage of resources, and she doesn't need anyone's olive branch. I think she may not participate in the competition, the maid said softly. Natural spirits have appeared in the restricted area several times in the past, but this is the first time even I have seen a perfect natural spirit like hers. Luo Tan glanced sideways inadvertently and said softly, but it seems that although she has no shortage of resources, she also wants to express herself in front of the one she loves. A trace of doubt flashed in the maid's eyes, and she looked along. The attic was now much livelier than before, and many monks were chatting and laughing around a handsome young master. Not far from the noble young master, a girl in a purple skirt was sitting there, standing gracefully not far from him. Luo Tan smiled lightly. His popularity is really good. With the Taoist monk King Di here, even the elders who are in seclusion in the ancient family have to treat him with respect. It's no wonder that he is so sought after, the maid said softly. Luo Tan gently rubbed the edge of the cup with his fingertips and said leisurely, compared with this, I am more concerned about what kind of elixir a person who doesn't usually come into contact with alchemy can refine. For those who are new to alchemy, it is impossible to refine extremely high-grade elixirs no matter what. Musian cannot possibly not know this truth. But he still came to participate in the alchemy competition. Is he just going through the motions with his sister, or is there something else he can do? However, in fact, no matter whether Musian can win this alchemy competition, she is still very interested in this little monk. If he is willing, there is no harm in letting him stay with him for a few years in the future or giving him training resources. But then again, he went to G-Abyss that day, and the will of heaven descended into G-Abyss. Did it have anything to do with him? And when Luo Tan's mind was gradually becoming more active, at this moment, people were already coming and going in the attic. Located in a certain private room, the clear and elegant senior sister Lan was silently looking through the window at Musian, who had just arrived near the alchemy platform. Her expression was calm and her beautiful eyes were clear. Sister finally won the competition at the Immortal Ascension Conference. Not only did she get 3 imperial medicinal herbs, but she also won the right to use that guy. What are you going to use it for then? Lan Feiying's eyes sparkled. She stared at her sister with charming eyes, and asked with a smile. Lan Mulian wore a white dress with a green cloak like gauze, and her temperament was calm and elegant. She just replied calmly, Junior brother's right to use, that's just master's bad taste, don't take it seriously. Lan Feiying laughed softly, changed her leg and raised it, hooking her toes on the sexy red embroidered shoes, and said, he, if sister asks him, he will definitely abide by this rule. Don't even mention asking him to do something. Even if you ask him to use his tongue to clean your feet, he won't refuse. As soon as the voice fell, she saw her sister's white face, which was always light and elegant, was stained with 2 shy blushes, and she was a little charming in her coldness. She subconsciously retracted her feet, her beautiful eyes turned sideways. What are you talking about? Lan Feiying smiled charmingly, then gently stroked the ring on her green jade finger with her fingertips, and asked casually, by the way, has the law enforcement hall heard any news about Yayu? There has been no news. Lan Murian shook her head gently, and her eyes became more solemn. After returning to the sect, a sect disciple was wiped out without anyone noticing, leaving no trace. Such a heavenly method, even the land immortals who have returned to the realm of returning to the void may not be able to do it. Lan Feiying uttered an "oh" and said calmly, it's fine if he's dead. Yeah, you secretly colluded with the demon cultivators. Even if he doesn't die, he will be sent to the law enforcement hall for punishment. Lan Murian pondered for a moment and said softly, this matter is a bit strange. The demon cultivators in the demon world accidentally leaked that Yayu had colluded with the demon-devouring Rhino clan on the border of the demon world, and it just happened to be spread to the section. I always feel that someone did it on purpose. Lan Feiying lowered her eyes slightly, her voice was soft and seductive, whether it was intentional or not, in short, The sect later investigated and confirmed that you did collude with the demon-devouring Rhino clan and murdered his fellow disciples. That's enough, isn't it? Lan Murian was silent. After a while, Lan Feiying suddenly said, "He's on stage." Lan Murian woke up from his previous thoughts, turned his head slightly and looked out the window, and really saw Muzian and Lingxian following the group of alchemists on stage. However, Muzian obviously had a high awareness of anti-gank. Although he went on stage side by side with Lingxian, he did not hold hands. His black robe was embroidered with gold and silver threads, and he looked as elegant and noble as a nobleman. He was handsome and attracted the attention of countless female cultivators since he went on stage. "Sister, how many elixirs do you think he can refine?" Lan Feiying asked. Lan Murian pondered for a moment, and suddenly smiled brightly. "At most, it will be 3 grades. When she said this, a faint smile appeared on the corner of her mouth. How can someone who has never been in contact with alchemy refine high-quality elixirs? Even if Muzian frequently went in and out of the library and Dexinguan in the past few days, it is impossible for him to refine elixirs of too high a grade in a few days. No matter how much she believed in Muzian, she did not have much hope for this junior brother. I really don't know why the junior brother is making do with others. Could it be that he also has his eyes on the 8th grade elixir that Luo Tan gave to the winner? If an 8th grade elixir is used properly, one can even comprehend a trace of the Dao from it, and prepare for the future Dao enlightenment realm. This is indeed very exciting. Lan Feiying looked at her sister meaningfully with her beautiful eyes, and said with a smile, holding her cheeks with her hands, "But my sister got an emperor-level medicinal material from the southern wilderness and the western regions at the Ascension Conference this time, plus the 3 emperor-level medicinal materials given by the sect, which is equivalent to 3 8th grade elixirs. If he comes to you, will my sister give it to him?" Lan Murian raised her beautiful eyebrows and said lightly, "If he really wants it, it's fine. But with his personality, if I give it to him for no reason, I'm afraid his self-esteem will get in the way and he won't be able to accept it." Lan Feiying had a charming smile on her charming face, teasing, "How can there be so many self-esteem? I'm afraid that my sister herself is embarrassed to ask for it. Otherwise, a plant of emperor-level medicinal materials would be enough to buy him." When Lan Murian heard this, she sneered on the spot, "If I really keep him by my side, I'm afraid someone will be unable to sit still immediately. Let's not talk about Bairuoxi for the time being, and then the Qing Emperor will probably have to take action first. It seems to have begun." At this time, Lan Feiying suddenly spoke, and also pulled Lan Murian back to reality from her previous thoughts. She looked along, and in front of the extremely vast alchemy platform, a group of alchemists had already taken out a huge furnace from the ring at the signal of an old man, and at the same time prepared the medicinal materials for their own alchemy this time. Even those who don't know how to make pills can more or less tell what grade of pill the other party is going to make by looking at the medicinal materials. What grade of pill is he going to make? Lan Murian couldn't help but whisper to herself as she watched Muzian take out a purple cauldron in front of the alchemy table. At the same time, many cultivators in the attic, even Luo Tan's eyes, fell on Muzian. He is the Taoist partner of the Green Emperor, and his previous actions have created countless topics. Although he is only at the 5th level of the spirit refining realm, he has always been at the forefront of the storm. But the power behind him is too huge, so even those who dislike Muzian in private dare not make any move. The last time Muzian died, the forbidden area was revealed. Most of the Dongzhou cultivators did not know the reason, but as a member of the ancient family, they deduced the truth from the relationship between Lingxian and Muzian. Earth-grade cauldron, it should be said that he is worthy of being the Taoist partner of the Green Emperor. He is really generous. Earth-grade cauldron will not cause the cauldron to break even if it is used to refine 8th grade elixirs. It seems that Mr. Mu has been refining elixirs in secret in the past. Not only is he talented in cultivation, but he also has such a talent for refining elixirs. Senior Kingdi has a good vision. Seeing the cauldron that Musian took out, there was a faint sound of discussion from the audience, and the maid beside Luo Ten was also a little surprised. She whispered, "It seems that Mr. Mu has been hiding his identity as an alchemist. He even prepared the Earth-grade cauldron. Earth-grade cauldron, if it is not an alchemist, it is impossible to carry such a valuable item with him. After all, even in the entire Jizhu, the number of Earth-grade cauldrons may be less than 1,000. I think only alchemists would spend so much time on this. After all, alchemists are the ones who love the cauldron the most. I haven't seen Mu Lang these few days, and I don't know what kind of elixir Mu Lang has prepared." In the crowd below the stage, Ruoxi, who was wearing a gorgeous white dress, raised her head and gazed at the young man on the alchemy stage, and said softly, "He has never been exposed to alchemy in the past. Even if he has a natural spiritual body, he can only refine a third-grade elixir at most. Even if there are some miracles, it can only be a fourth-grade elixir at most," Wei Mengru said faintly. As a maid who has always been by Musian's side, she naturally knows what kind of character Musian has. In the past, she had never seen him refine any elixir in Tianqian City. Now it is impossible to refine any high-grade elixir at the last minute. Even if he has talent, a fourth-grade elixir is already the limit. When Wei Mengru just thought of this, she was stunned when she saw the medicinal materials that Musian took out from the ring. Then, she blinked, as if she couldn't believe what she saw, closed her eyes slightly, prayed silently in her heart for a moment, and then opened her eyes again. Immediately afterwards, Wei Mengru fell into silence for a long time. Among the cultivators in the audience, many people had read books about refining elixirs, so they naturally recognized what kind of elixir Musian's medicinal materials were used to refine. For a moment, the people in the audience fell into a brief silence, and a big question mark seemed to appear above the heads of countless people. Until someone was stunned for an unknown period of time, and then he murmured in an incredible voice, "The medicinal materials for the second-grade elixir. Close to 10,000, it's not too much to ask for a vote. I'll try to make another big wave tomorrow." So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 383. Yaokai Holy Land. The Queen Mother of Yaokai sat in front of the throne of Xuanyu Hall, looking a little unhappy. Under the throne, the elders also looked solemn, whispering to each other. At this time, the Queen Mother of Yaokai looked around the audience and said softly, "Has Musian been found?" To reply to the Queen Mother, Musian seemed to have returned to Lianji sect with a woman riding a dragon bird a few days ago. Fairy Yao Yu said that he was here to participate in today's alchemy competition, a spy in the audience said respectfully. After hearing this, the Queen Mother of Yaokai's expression eased a little, and nodded slightly. "It's good that he is still safe." A few days ago, the Holy Land of Yaokai realized that Musian had been secretly taken out of Yaokai. If someone hadn't found that one dragon bird was missing when counting them, I'm afraid they wouldn't know about it until now. After all, no Yaokai disciple dared to approach the Qing Emperor's attic rashly, and naturally they didn't know that Musian was no longer in Yaokai. I don't know if the Saint Lady knows about this. A Yaoqi elder sighed softly. The Queen Mother of Yaoqi had a subtle look on her face, and said faintly, "I'm afraid she doesn't know. She probably heard something about the Green Emperor and the Sword Palace Master and others, so she knew that Musian was able to leave the Yaoqi Holy Land without anyone noticing, and there must be a great master who was obstructing him. If the Green Emperor knew, he would have fought with the other party long ago. How could he let Musian leave the Yaoqi Holy Land for no reason? Should we tell the Saint Lady now?" Someone asked tentatively. The Queen Mother of Yaoqi shook her head slowly. "The Saint Lady is suspected to be in seclusion, so don't disturb her." After a pause, she continued, "Since Musian only went to Lianji sect, Let's wait until the saint lady finishes her seclusion before mentioning this to her. At the end, there was a bit of helplessness in her voice. I don't know what the Green Emperor would think if he knew about this. Lianji sect, Kanghai Peak. The medicinal materials for the second grade elixir. When seeing the medicinal materials prepared by Musian, the monks in the audience and even the elders who were responsible for judging the level of the elixir could not help but be stunned for a moment, and even wondered if they were dazzled. The Xiao Huan Dan among the second grade elixirs. After an unknown period of silence, Regina's slight self-talking was heard from the audience. Her skin was white and translucent, her temperament was weak, her light golden hair was scattered on her back, and her bright eyes looked at Musian with interest. Based on her understanding of Musian, she naturally did not think that he would prepare a second-grade elixir to participate in the competition. But she had someone secretly investigate Musian before. Musian had never been involved in alchemy in the past. Second-grade or third-grade elixirs were probably the best he could make today. I thought he would prepare a third-grade elixir, but I didn't expect that he would choose the Xiaohuandan, which has the simplest refining method. Nigeti's preparations were more thorough. The southern wild saint, wearing a bright red dress, looked up at the other young man on the alchemy stage. Nigeti's preparations were obviously sixth-grade elixirs. Except for Ye Lingxian, the medicinal materials he prepared were enough to dominate the whole audience. As if he had noticed the gaze of the saint under the stage, Nigeti pursed his lips, but the corners of his mouth still couldn't hide the arc of pride. Although he was not as strong as Regina in terms of realm, his alchemy level was definitely one of the best among his peers. On the contrary, Musian, who had been in contact with the saint lady before, was a little disappointing. Nigeti turned his head slightly and saw the earth-grade cauldron in front of Musian, and then took a look at the poor and shabby medicinal materials he took out from the ring, and couldn't help laughing. Musian, today's alchemy competition was prepared by the Empress of Yuzhou herself, and the alchemists on the stage prepared at least fourth-grade pills. Isn't your second-grade pill a little too shabby? Musian glanced at him and smiled slightly. The important thing about the pill is not the grade, but its efficacy and how much help the pill provides to the cultivator. Of course. Nigeti nodded slightly, and then suddenly showed a faint smile. But if the pill is too low grade, how much help do you think it can give people? I think my second grade pill is easier to like. Musian smiled. Nigeti sneered secretly, ignored Musian, and just glanced in the direction of the crowd. Musian looked over and soon saw a sickly beauty in a red dress in the crowd. She was looking up at the stage. When she noticed Musian's gaze, she glanced at him and then a charming smile appeared on her face. Musian smiled gently at her. Nigeti seemed to notice the two of them flirting with each other, and his face gradually darkened. Musian glanced at the ugly-looking southern wilderness saint and couldn't help laughing. It seems that not everyone likes high-quality elixirs. Nigeti just snorted coldly and ignored Musian, but began to operate the cauldron in his body and began to work on refining elixirs. At the same time, everyone on the alchemy stage also closed their eyes slightly and were preparing to refine elixirs. Musian glanced at Ye Lingxian, who was also preparing not far away, then quickly retracted his gaze and sent a message to Regina in the audience. Sorry, I seem to have upset Nigeti again. Regina looked at Musian in surprise, as if she was a little surprised that he had the time to chat while refining the elixir. But soon she transmitted her voice, it has nothing to do with me if Nigeti is unhappy. Why are you telling me this, Mr. Mew? But normally you need to concentrate when refining the elixir, but you actually have the time to chat with me, which is a bit strange. Musian chuckled, second-grade elixir doesn't require much concentration. Then, he hesitated for a moment and continued to transmit his voice in a gentle voice. In fact, I don't intend to offend Nigeti. If possible, I hope Miss Regina can say a few good words for me later, so that if I go to the southern wilderness in the future, he will make things difficult for me. Regina raised her eyes and stared at Musian. Her beautiful eyes, as clear as a cold pond, were filled with a playful smile. If you go to the southern wilderness with me in the future, I will definitely protect you. You can rest assured. Musian hesitated for a long time before transmitting his voice softly, but you are the saint of southern wilds, and Nigeti is also the saint's son. If I really go to southern wilds with you in the future, what should I do if he asks someone to retaliate against me? Even if you protect me, if you quarrel because of my affairs, I will feel guilty. Regina frowned slightly and said calmly, Mr. Mew, don't worry. Although he is the saint of southern wilds, if I want to protect you, no one will be of any use, not even Nigeti, the saint's son. I understand, you have a higher status in southern wilds than him, Musian replied reservedly. Well, then thank you Miss Regina in advance, and I will think carefully about whether to go to southern wilds after this. By the way, after the alchemy competition is over, I want to invite Regina to go to Yaoqi Holy Land to relax. I wonder if you are interested, Musian suddenly transmitted again. Yaoqi Holy Land. Even Regina couldn't help but be stunned for a moment. Previously, the three pillars of the southern wasteland had made some small moves towards the Yaoqi Holy Land. As the saintess of the southern wasteland, if she went to the Yaoqi Holy Land, it was unknown how much trouble she would cause. I have already told Senior Kingdi that there would be no problem even if you went to the Yaoqi Holy Land. Besides, it would be more convenient to give you the natural Tau fetus and a wisp of reincarnation aura this time in the Yaoqi Holy Land, Musian said. Hearing this, Regina pondered for a while, and finally nodded slightly. While the two were talking, the aura between heaven and earth had already begun to be gradually mobilized by a group of cultivators. Everyone has started to refine the elixir. Musian also quickly gathered his thoughts, held his breath and concentrated, and urged the earth-grade cauldron in front of him. At the same time, his aura controlled the common low-grade medicinal materials in front of him, and put them into the cauldron one by one for smelting. It looks like he really intends to refine the second-grade elixir. After seeing this scene, someone in the audience couldn't help but whispered. They had originally held out a glimmer of hope for Musian, thinking that the medicinal materials Musian prepared must have his reasons. After all, this young cultivator had passed several tests before. But now it seems that he really intends to refine a second-grade elixir to participate in this alchemy competition. Even Luo Tan in the attic frowned at this scene. If Musian had refined a third or fourth-grade elixir, she could still find an excuse, such as praising Musian's excellent alchemy talent, and then invite him to Yuzhou, or even accept him as a disciple, so that he can stay by her side. But Musian had refined a second-grade elixir. Those novice alchemists can refine second-grade elixirs. If she praised Musian's excellent alchemy talent, it would seem a bit fake, and people would see that she was just interested in Musian. Time passed silently, and after nearly an hour, the sky was covered with dark clouds and the cold wind was howling. The strong smell of medicine almost filled the main peak of Kanghai Peak, and the spiritual energy in front of the alchemy platform was extremely thin. A group of alchemists were trying to absorb the spiritual energy between heaven and earth for their own use, and then injected it into the cauldron to assist in condensing the pill into shape. At this time, a cauldron on the stage suddenly produced a dense crack. The monk's eyes were slightly focused, and before he could react, he heard a bang and the cauldron was completely shattered. As the sound fell, soon there were sounds of cauldrons breaking one after another. Amid the shattering sounds, there was a place where the pills had gradually condensed and exuded a strong smell of medicine. Nigeti inadvertently glanced at the cauldrons that were breaking one after another around him, and a faint smile appeared on his face. As expected at the beginning, the only threats were the saint of the restricted area and the saint of the world sea, Tang Sufei. He raised his hand and the spiritual energy on the alchemy platform gathered in front of him. After purification, the spiritual energy was injected into the cauldron. The spiritual energy needed for alchemy is best to be temporarily mobilized and purified from the heaven and earth. Just as Nagati was about to retract his gaze and focus on alchemy, he suddenly noticed a very strong medicinal fragrance permeating the alchemy platform. Nagati was slightly stunned and turned his head subconsciously. It was Musian. The elixir in his cauldron seemed to be about to come out of the furnace. Isn't he refining a second-grade elixir? Nagati looked over, and then couldn't help but be stunned. Then, he stared at the small huandan in Musian's cauldron. Something is not right. Ordinary second-grade elixirs can only emit a faint white light at most, but at this moment, the second-grade elixir in Musian's cauldron emits a faint colorful glow. Although it is not conspicuous, alchemists know what it means. After all, elixirs that can emit colorful glows are at least 6th grade. Is this really Xiao Huandan? In the attic, Luo Tan also looked at the black-robed nobleman on the alchemy table with a hint of surprise. This Xiao Huandan does not look like a second-grade elixir now. She inadvertently glanced at Musian's focused expression, and then lowered her spiritual consciousness in front of the alchemy table and scanned Musian's cauldron. The cauldron did not seem to have any special features. It seemed that it was his prescription problem. Luo Tan's eyes became more and more interested, and her spiritual consciousness swept across the surface of the Xiao Huandan. Almost at that moment, her body couldn't help but tremble slightly, and her beautiful eyes with light slowly raised, staring at Musian. Heavenly spiritual energy. Boom! A deafening roar suddenly came from the sky. Luo Tan woke up from her previous trance and looked at the cauldron refined by Nagati. Originally, the elixir he refined should be of grade 6, but at this moment, she found that the elixir in Nagati's cauldron had already been improved by 1 grade. He just added Balianhua. The cultivators in front of the alchemy platform naturally noticed this scene, and soon someone spoke out the truth in anger. As soon as this was said, the faces of countless cultivators on the alchemy platform became a little ugly, and even more dissatisfied. If you must say, Balianhua doesn't belong to the category of medicinal materials at all, but should be called elixir. Nagati is cheating. On the alchemy stage, many people were quite dissatisfied and frowned. Originally, they might have had the possibility of winning, but once Balianhua was added to the elixir, it would add a bit of rich spiritual energy to it, and the solid foundation elixir would completely become a 7th grade elixir from the 6th grade. In this way, even the 6th grade elixir refined by Ye Lingxian would be much worse. However, even if he was dissatisfied, even if Nagati took advantage of the loopholes in the rules, there was no way to say anything to him at the moment. Nagati showed a faint smile on his face, raised his hands and bowed, saying, Balianhua can be said to be an elixir, but it can also be a medicinal material. If you must say, you can only say that you are not well prepared, and you can't blame others. At the end, he took another look at the 6th grade elixir in Ye Lingxuan's cauldron that seemed to be ready to be baked, and the smile on his face became more intense. The winner of the alchemy competition can get an 8th grade elixir. This 8th grade elixir is equivalent to an imperial grade medicinal material, and it is an imperial grade medicinal material that does not need to be refined by oneself. If used properly, it can even help him comprehend a ray of the Daorime between heaven and earth and break through another grade. For this, sacrificing 100 refining flour is worth it. When thinking of this, Nagati inadvertently glanced at the faint colorful light emitted from Musian's cauldron, and a hint of sarcasm flashed in his eyes. Even if Musian has hidden a trick, what does it matter? At present, the elixir in Musian's cauldron can only have the aura of a 6th grade elixir at most, and the solid foundation elixir in his own cauldron can be promoted to a 7th grade elixir after the 100 refining flour is completely melted. It seems that Master Mu is well prepared, but I underestimated it before, Nagati said with a faint smile, but there was a hint of sarcasm in his tone. Ye Lingxian glanced at it casually, and then frowned slightly. Although she didn't have much desire to win, the Balianhua added by Nagati was obviously taking advantage of the loopholes in the rules. If it weren't for the Balianhua, Nagati's pill might not be better than the special pill made by Brother Mu. Musian's expression was also a little subtle, and he looked at the solid foundation pill in Nagati's furnace in surprise. Even he had never thought that the pill could be forcibly upgraded through medicinal materials. A 7th grade pill, this is completely impossible for the alchemists present. After all, a 7th grade pill must be at least in the return to void realm to be refined. Nagati noticed Musian's gaze from a distance. He glanced at Musian and said with a smile, "It seems that Master Mu's previous efforts to prepare for it have been in vain." Anyone with a discerning eye can see the specialness of Musian's elixir, and Nagati can naturally see it. But so what? Even if Musian did not refine a 2nd grade elixir, but a special mutated elixir, it would only be a 6th grade elixir at best. Compared to the 7th grade solid foundation elixir, it is a whole grade lower. Musian looked at the elixir in Nagati's cauldron with interest and said with a smile, 100 refining flowers can indeed add some quality to the elixir you refine. Nagati sneered and said lightly, "Master Mu, don't say that I am cheating. If you want to blame someone, you can only blame your insufficient preparation. Of course not, after all, this 100 refining flowers is also a part of the medicinal materials," Musian said with a smile. Even Nagati was stunned when he heard this. He thought Musian would be angry about this, but he didn't expect that he would actually speak up for him. The dissatisfied voices of the monks in front of the alchemy platform seemed to have become smaller. It stands to reason that Musian, as a victim, should be dissatisfied with Nagati's use of special medicinal materials, but the other party is speaking for Nagati. At this moment, all the cultivators hesitated. And Yalingxian also subconsciously looked at Musian, with a bit of doubt in her gorgeous purple eyes. In such a strange silence, Musian slowly put away the cauldron, and then put the special pill into the box, and then walked towards Yalingxian leisurely. "Brother Mu," Yalingxian looked at Musian, who walked up to her and whispered. Sensing the tenderness in his gaze, Yalingxian's eyes rarely flashed a little panic, and whispered, "What to do?" Musian looked down at the purple-dressed girl in front of him, and said softly, "She has been unwilling to give in before. Now I want some interest first, which should not be too much, right?" Yalingxian was slightly stunned, subconsciously glanced at the audience, and whispered, "Wait until the alchemy competition is over." Musian chuckled, "It will be too late to wait until the alchemy competition is over." Nagati frowned slightly and said coldly, "Master Mu, it is a bit unreasonable to be intimate with a girl in this occasion, right? Do I need to ask for the consent of our southern wilderness saint if I want to be close to someone?" Musian laughed loudly. Although he was smiling, Musian couldn't help but feel numb when he noticed several cold eyes. It goes without saying that senior sister Ruoxi and the others must be there for such a big event as the alchemy competition. But Musian still maintained his usual elegance and a calm smile. Then, under the dull gaze of the crowd, he lowered his head slightly and kissed Yalingxian's rosy lips gently. Yalingxian's eyes slowly widened and she looked at Musian in surprise. But soon, she felt a very special spiritual energy quietly injected into her body. And that warm spiritual energy also made her mind gradually clear, as if she understood something. Her eyes flickered slightly, and she hugged Musian's neck tightly with both hands, actively responding to his enthusiasm. After a while, their lips parted. Musian raised his hand and stretched his waist, and then bowed to the attic not far away. "I'm so sorry, I disturbed the alchemy competition. I feel guilty, so I decided to withdraw from this competition. I hope Senior Yehuang will forgive me." After saying that, he jumped off the alchemy platform generously. What on earth is Musian doing? Almost at that moment, countless cultivators had the same idea in their minds. "We know that you have a close relationship with the Saint of the Forbidden Zone, but there is no need to be intimate with her in front of so many people, right? Isn't this arousing jealousy? And the confidants in the audience are still watching. If the news is passed to the ears of the Green Emperor, isn't he afraid of being locked up in a small dark room? While these people's attention was attracted by Musian, they did not notice that Ye Lingxian was quietly circulating the heavenly spiritual energy that had just been obtained in his body and injecting it into the 6th grade pill. On the other side, Nigeti seemed to be confused by Musian's sudden operation, so that he was stunned for a long time before coming back to his senses. He took a deep breath and exhaled slowly. Calm down, no matter what, the important thing this time is the alchemy competition. Don't be affected by Musian's actions just now. Nigeti quickly suppressed the jealousy in his heart, gradually calmed down, and his eyes turned to the cauldron in front of him. The 7th grade initial solid foundation pill is almost finished. Everyone obviously noticed this scene, and their attention was quickly attracted by the pills in Nigeti's cauldron. Only Bairuoxi's eyes were staring at Musian, who was jumping off the alchemy platform. At this time, the joy in Nigeti's eyes was not yet expressed in words, and suddenly a roar was heard in the sky. 7th grade pill tribulation. Some people understood and reacted, with a little more horror in their eyes, and their eyes swept across the alchemy platform. Then, their eyes suddenly stagnated on the cauldron in front of Ye Lingxian. How is it possible? Nigeti was also stunned for a moment. When he looked at Ye Lingxian, he found that the elixir refined by Ye Lingxian had become a complete 7th grade elixir. In less than an incense stick of time, the elixir had completed the upgrade. At this moment, not only Nigeti, but even the elders of the Holy Land who knew the art of alchemy were in a short daze. It should be said that she is worthy of being the saint of the restricted area. Did she use some secret method? But even if it is a secret method, it should not be able to make the elixir advance. At that moment, many of the monks present were puzzled, and they couldn't understand what happened in this short incense stick. The saint of the Forbidden Zone is extremely talented, and the Forbidden Zone is extremely mysterious. It is not surprising that there is a secret method that can improve the quality of the elixir. Not only is her appearance stunning, but her cultivation talent and even her alchemy talent are top-notch. This woman is truly stunning. Many people admired Ye Lingxian, thinking that there were some secret methods in the Forbidden Zone that improved the quality of the elixir, and their eyes were all on the beautiful girl on the stage. Luo Tan's beautiful eyes flickered slightly, and she looked at the cauldron in front of Ye Lingxian with suspicion. After being silent for an unknown length of time, her eyes fell inadvertently on Musian, who had just stepped down. Everyone can't see it, but that doesn't mean that the medicine king of Yuzhou can't see the fishiness in it either. Just by kissing, the elixir can complete its evolution? His natural furnace can still be used like this? After a brief moment of confusion, the corners of Luo Tan's mouth inadvertently raised a slight arc, and his eyes as he stared at Musian became a little more fiery. The alchemy competition here is in full swing, and at this moment, deep in the Yaokai Holy Land, which is far away from Lianji sect, in an attic, a woman is lying in an ancient coffin, her eyes slightly closed. Seems to be meditating. This is a very closed attic, and because of the Qing Emperor's order, no one has ever noticed that the Qing Emperor's immortal body at this moment seems to have a faint layer of light that is more holy and gentle than before. In the house, there seem to be feathers scattered in all directions. Spiritual energy is gradually filling her cauldron, and with the filling of spiritual energy, the ancient coffin seems to be faintly shaking. The aura of the Hedeo realm became more and more terrifying and powerful, and finally at some point, King Di slowly opened his eyes. The overwhelming aura of terror filled the entire Yaokai Holy Land, the ground shook, and all the old monsters in retreat opened their eyes one after another, all looking towards the quiet attic. Yao Meng raised his fingertips slightly, and almost at that moment, the sky during the day seemed to collapse, revealing a black hole as deep as an abyss. She waved her fingertips lightly. The collapsed sky was restored to its original state in the next moment. Really? Yao Meng whispered to himself, I've already had my first glimpse of the feathering realm. After uniting with the new Tiandao, he got the first seat in the heaven. At this moment, Yao Meng is only one test from the 9 provinces Tiandao before he can reach the true realm of ascension. If he really becomes a human, who else in Kyushu can stop him? When thinking of this, a faint smile appeared on Yao Meng's face. Who would have thought that a ray of spiritual consciousness that had almost disappeared from heaven and earth would now be the first to touch the threshold of the ascension realm? And all of this is because of him. When Yao Meng came here, he looked sideways into the room with soft eyes. Then, she couldn't help but be stunned for a moment. Where are others? At this time, there was suddenly the sound of hurried footsteps outside the house, and then, a vague and respectful voice sounded, Holy Lady, are you okay? Yao Meng looked at the empty room silently and said softly, I'm fine, come in. The door opened quietly and silently. The Queen Mother of Yaokai hesitated for a moment and said, Why do I feel that your aura seems to be much stronger than before? Yao Meng just nodded slightly. Then, under the astonished gaze of the Queen Mother of Yaokai, she whispered, Within 1 month, I will be able to break through the constraints of the Hedeo realm. The Queen Mother of Yaokai was stunned for an unknown amount of time, her rosy little mouth opened slightly, and she looked at Yao Meng in a daze and surprise. Ascension Realm. Will the first immortal in the Ascension Realm appear in Kyushu? Yao Meng's expression was indifferent, he just glanced at the empty room and said casually, By the way, where did he go? The Queen Mother of Yaokai with a gentle smile had a look of helplessness on her face. She hesitated for a moment and said softly, A few days ago, a great master of Hedeo secretly broke through Yaokai's formation, because the attic where Qing Emperor lived was usually empty. People were approaching, so no one knew that Muzian had left. Until today. The Queen Mother of Yaokai looked at the Qing Emperor, who had an ethereal and fairy-like temperament, and said softly, Today, some Yaokai disciples belatedly discovered that Mu Xiao had been secretly taken away. The indifferent smile on Yao Meng's face slowly solidified, and he tilted his head slightly. Was my house robbed in front of my eyes? You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 384. Yaokai Holy Land. In a quiet attic, vast spiritual energy condensed here like a whirlpool, so that the divine pond outside was surging slightly, exuding rich spiritual energy. Yao Meng was sitting in front of the ancient coffin, wearing a green skirt and shawl. Her facial features were as exquisite as jade carvings, and a hint of indifference was forced on her flawless face. Just the tight red lips and the coldness flashing in his eyes were enough to imagine that the Qing Emperor was obviously very angry at this moment. After just meditating for a few days, my home was stolen? Moreover, the other party didn't even leave any soup behind, and even carried the people away. Yao Meng stared at the Queen Mother of Yaokai in silence for an unknown length of time before she said quietly, Do you know who he left with? From beginning to end, there were no traces of fighting here, and when she woke up, she was still lying in this mysterious ancient coffin. You don't need to think about it to know that Muzian was not taken away by force, but that he left with them on his own initiative. Queen Mother of Yaokai slowly shook her head, I don't know, I just know that they rode away a dragon bird from Yaokai Holy Land and went to Liangyi section. Did he return to the Liangyi sect? When Yao Meng heard this, he felt slightly relieved. No matter what, it doesn't matter if you don't leave Dongzhou. You can just go find him after that. What's he doing in Australia? A few days ago, the Immortal Ascension Conference came to an end, and Lan Mulian, the disciple of the leader of Liangyi sect, won the final victory. The Medicine Emperor of Yuzhou wanted to take this opportunity to hold an alchemy competition. According to the pill that Yao Yu sent not long ago, according to the news, Mu Xiao seems to be participating in the alchemy competition, Queen Mother of Yaokai explained. Does he still know how to make alchemy? Yao Meng whispered to himself. No. He should have used his special spiritual energy to make pills. If the Holy Lady is worried, why don't I send someone to take a look? Or do you plan to go there in person? Queen Mother of Yaokai asked with a gentle smile. No need. Yao Meng shook his head. I was originally worried that his safety would be threatened if he left Dongzhou, but if he is only in Lianji sect, I am not in a hurry to find him. Yao Meng expressed his indifference without any money, and then his eyes fell on the Queen Mother of Yaokai, and continued, besides, those old guys in seclusion in Zhou are very clever. When I first glimpsed Yahua, the world the shackles are all on me, you can detect something strange here, and so can others. In the past few days, I will prepare the formations in the Yaokai Holy Land, and I will use them later to gain insights into the Ascension realm. Although she explained so much, she still felt that she still wanted to go to Lianji section. The Queen Mother of Yaokai looked at Yao Meng with a subtle expression and a meaningful expression, and couldn't help but sigh. Qing Emperor really likes him. In the past, the monks from Kyushu who pursued the Qing Emperor could all be cued from Yaokai to the demon world. The natural Tao fetus made even the Hedeo masters excited, but no one has captured the heart of this fairy. As a result, now he is succeeded by a young monk in the realm of God refining, and he still cares about him so much that he looks like he is falling in love. If it weren't for him, I probably wouldn't be able to touch the Ascension realm and get a ray of insight, Yao Meng said lightly. The beautiful woman's eyes moved slightly, and she said in surprise, what the saint means, is it because of Muzian that you can reach the Ascension realm? Could it be related to the Tian furnace cauldron? She naturally knew that Muzian's natural furnace cauldron was extremely special, but in the past and present, there had been monks with natural furnace cauldron physiques in Kyushu. Although it is true that you can get a huge spiritual energy supplement after cultivating with a person from the Tian furnace, it is not so exaggerated. Beings like the great Lian Hideo can help, and even help them break the shackles between heaven and earth. Break through the limits of the monk realm. The room fell into a brief silence and stillness. Yao Meng inadvertently looked at the subtle look on the Queen Mother of Yaokai. Although this beautiful woman had been practicing for hundreds of years, there was no trace of time left on her body. Her skin is still firm, and her well-maintained figure exudes a mature charm like a ripe peach, plump, and her charm is still there. Leaving aside the Yaokai saint and the innocent and romantic girl Yao Xian, in this Yaokai holy land, the beauty of the Yaokai Queen Mother is already outstanding. Withdrawing his gaze calmly, Yao Meng said in a calm tone, what I said in the Lianji sect not long ago is already known to the monks from all over the East continent. Now that he is my Taoist companion, I will marry him. When Yao Meng finished speaking, he looked at the Queen Mother of Yaokai with a smile and said, do you have any suggestions on this? The Queen Mother of Yaokai soon woke up, pondered for a moment, and then said with a gentle smile, the marriage of the holy girl is fake, but digging holes and waiting for people to dance is real, but I think the holy girl's feelings for Mu Xiao are sincere, and heaven and earth can learn from them. Even if it's just a fake marriage, it can still be a fake marriage. The natural furnace cauldron that can be continuously advanced is certainly exciting, but since she is King Di's Taoist companion, she can only restrain the distracting thoughts in her heart. The Queen Mother of Yaokai quickly said worriedly, however, if the saint really plans to break free from the unlocking of heaven and earth and achieve the supreme fruit, I am afraid that she will attract many demons and ghosts during the breakthrough period. The last time Qing Emperor reunited with his immortal body, he attracted the secret Hedeo power to decisively stop her. If it is true as Qing Emperor said, she has touched the threshold of the feathering realm, how can this old monster in Kyushu be tolerated? Can you get her? Even just peeking into the gate of the Ascension realm is already terrifying enough. Originally, the Hedeo realm ninjas who lived in peace, but at this time, it was suddenly discovered that one of the Hedeo realm had found a way to break free from the shackles of heaven and earth and escape the rules of heaven and earth, and even planned to break through. Even if the Green Emperor stated that he had no intention of occupying other places, he would probably be regarded as an enemy by some people. In the future, when she breaks through the Yahua realm, I am afraid that the Yaokai Holy Land will be under currents again. Yao Meng opened her red lips and said in a soft and gentle voice, "It's not like I haven't seen monsters and demons in the past. This marriage is to clear some troubles in advance. Does the saint plan to try to impact Yahua in the next few days?" Yaokai Queen Mother couldn't help asking. Yao Meng smiled but said nothing. Although every inch of her skin exudes a sacred luster and the smile on her face is even more friendly, for some reason, Queen Mother Yao Qi feels that this fairy is obviously black when cut open. Compared to such insignificant things, I am more concerned about his ranking in the alchemy competition this time. "Did Yao Yu mention it?" Yao Meng asked casually. Yao Yu's news was before the alchemy competition began, but if I remember correctly, young friend Mu doesn't seem to understand the art of alchemy, Queen Mother Yao Qi said. "He doesn't know how to make alchemy." Yao Meng raised her eyebrows slightly, covered her mouth and chuckled, "but he has many tricks. If Muzian were to make alchemy, he would not be able to use the spiritual energy of his natural furnace, but you have to know that his own furnace is also blessed by the spiritual energy of the heaven. The spiritual energy and the elixir are linked. If the spiritual energy of the heaven is used, the elixir refined will not be too bad." Based on her understanding of Muzian, if he didn't have some confidence, he would not be able to participate in the alchemy competition. "Forget it. After I prepare the formation ceremony in the next few days, I will go to Lianji sect in person." Yao Meng smiled lightly, "Then I will bring him back to get married and play a play with me. But if the fake play becomes real at that time, it doesn't matter." Lianji sect. The Lianji sect seems to be much quieter today. During the Ascension Conference, cultivators' flying swords can be seen everywhere, but in front of the main peaks today, there are not many cultivators. But it's not because the Ascension Conference is over, but at this moment, all the cultivators have gathered near the alchemy platform of Kanghai Peak. There is an attic on each side of the alchemy platform, and at this moment, the attic is full of cultivators, and even under the stage, there are many cultivators from the ancient family. While looking at the alchemists on the stage, they communicate with the elders of their own family and discuss the alchemists they value. Although Muzian's alchemy skills today are eye-catching, he is not considered by the ancient families. After all, he has the blessing of the Green Emperor and has an ambiguous relationship with the Saint of the Forbidden Zone. It is easy to imagine that he will not lack any resources, so he will naturally not accept their invitation. After giving Ya Lingxian special spiritual energy, Muzian walked down the alchemy platform, and then soon saw Bai Ruoxi in the corner of the crowd. She had a gentle look on her face, and the white palace skirt that fit her personality was close to her body. Her hair was tied up with a jade hairpin, and the drooping strands of black hair were blown by the cold wind, adding a bit of weakness that made people feel pity at first sight. "Mu Lang, your performance today is really eye-catching. Although you didn't win the final competition, it's your business that everyone discusses the most." Looking at Muzian, who was walking towards here, Bai Ruoxi said with a faint smile. Her expression was normal, as if Muzian had not done anything just now. However, this seemingly gentle voice made Muzian feel the chill in his heart. The situation was urgent just now. "If I didn't help, I'm afraid Nigeti would succeed." Muzian came to Bai Ruoxi, stretched out his hand to put a strand of hair that slipped from her forehead behind her ear, and said softly. Bai Ruoxi hummed, looked obedient, and smiled. I believe Mu Lang is not the kind of person who likes to show off in front of so many people." Muzian was immediately moved. Sure enough, he didn't make a mistake. Ruoxi is indeed a considerate, gentle girl. If he wasn't forced, Mu Lang would be intimate with Sister Lingxian in private, but he certainly wouldn't be in front of so many people. Bai Ruoxi smiled lightly and continued to add. Muxian. He has always been like this in the past. Even if he was intimate with a girl, he would never be so high-profile. Wei Mengru, who was standing by, looked at Muxian with disdain and added a stab. Muxian was unable to refute for a moment. If you must say, Bai Ruoxi and Wei Mengru both knew Mr. Mu's character very well and knew that he was not the kind of person who would be intimate with a girl in public in such an occasion. But if he was with a girl in private, he would not be so timid. Fortunately, Bai Ruoxi knew that this occasion was not suitable for punishing Mu Lang. She quickly raised her head and looked at the stage, whispering, Sister Lingxian really won. Muxian raised his head and looked. The cultivators on the stage had already finished refining the elixir, and Ye Lingxian had also passed the elixir tribulation. A flawless 7th grade elixir was presented to the world. It exudes a faint 7-colored glow, and has an extremely strong medicinal fragrance, even mixed with an extremely rich spiritual energy. Although it has not been blessed by the natural furnace cauldron, the blessing of heavenly spiritual energy alone has exuded an extremely attractive medicinal fragrance. It seems that the winner of this alchemy competition has been decided. At this time, a gorgeous and beautiful woman appeared in front of the alchemy stage. Senior Medicine Emperor. There was a respectful voice in front of the alchemy stage. Luo Tan looked around at everyone, then looked at the 7th grade elixir in Ye Lingxuan's hand with a smile, and said, Your control of spiritual energy is very exquisite, and it is just as I expected from the beginning. The first saint in the restricted area to perfectly inherit the physique of a natural spiritual body, her talent is indeed astonishing. Among the previous alchemists, Ye Lingxuan's control of spiritual energy was the most exquisite, and there was no waste of spiritual energy. This is an especially important point for alchemists. Thank you for your appreciation, Senior Ye Lingxian bowed slightly to express her courtesy. Luo Tan gave a slight signal to the maid beside him. The maid immediately understood and said respectfully, Miss Lingxian, please follow me. After that, he smiled politely at Nagiati, who came in 2nd place, and the alchemist who came in 3rd place, and motioned for the two of them to receive the rewards of this competition with him. Nagiati stared at Muxian in the audience with hatred. He always felt that the kiss between Muxian and the Forbidden Saint was not as simple as it seemed, but Luo Tan didn't say anything at the moment. If he questioned it at this time, wouldn't he also question Luo Tan's decision? No matter what, I can only swallow this breath. On the other side, Muxian was comforting the two beauties beside him. At this moment, he suddenly heard the voice of the maid coming to his ears. Mr. Mu, Your Majesty Luo Tan has an invitation at Beohua Tower. Beohua building is one of the attics near the alchemy platform just now. Why did Luo Tan take the initiative to look for me? I haven't even taken the initiative to look for her, Muxian reacted quickly and nodded with a smile. Then, he turned to the two beauties beside him and whispered, Ruoxi, Sister Mengru, I have something to go out for. Let's talk about the rest when we get back. No matter what, I definitely can't let go of this opportunity of contact now. After all, the gap between the 3-tailed fox and the 9-tailed fox is extremely huge. Tegzudan must be obtained no matter what. No matter what the cost. After Muxian found an excuse to run away, he soon noticed the special aura that Luo Tan deliberately exuded in the noisy attic. He climbed up to the attic and soon met the Empress of Yuzhou, who single-handedly created the immortal dynasty in a private room. She sat with her legs crossed, her intricately layered gorgeous white skirt embroidered with gold and silver threads, a luxurious and round special jade tied around her waist, and her black silk jade legs under the skirt were covered with flawless white boots. He tapped the ground every now and then. Bright and beautiful, with a luxurious and elegant temperament, and an indescribable sense of majesty. Little friend Mu, are you seriously depleting your spiritual energy? Luo Tan said with a smile. It's okay, it just consumes a little spiritual energy, it's nothing, Musian said with a smile, and sat across from him at Luo Tan's signal. Luo Tan smiled and nodded, that makes me feel relieved. She was already very beautiful, but she had put on light makeup, with a hint of crimson at the corners of her eyes, slightly pursed red lips, and a faint smile in her beautiful eyes, which was really alluring. I wonder why Senior came to see me today for something important, Musian asked tentatively, looking at that beautiful face several times. It stands to reason that the person who wins today should be Sister Ling Xian. The performance of Nagiati and Tang Sophie is also not bad. Luo Tan smiled and said, I am indeed very interested in the restricted area saint, but I am also interested in you. Musian hesitated and said, what does your majesty mean? You are a smart man, so I won't hold back. Luo Tan smiled and invited in a very sincere tone, I would like to take you back to Yuzhou to practice for a few years. What do you think, Mr. Mu? Mu Jian vaguely guessed something, secretly looked at this luxurious and elegant woman for a few times, and said calmly, why is it a junior? Musian originally thought that Luo Tan would express her appreciation for her talent in a reserved manner. However, the next moment, Luo Tan's words made Musian stunned for a moment. You are a natural furnace, and I am also a natural furnace. Luo Tan paused, as for why I am interested in you. Her slender fingertips gently stroked along the back of Musian's hand. She held her cheek in one hand, raised her eyes, and looked at Musian teasingly. What do you think? So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 385. I am a natural furnace, and you are also a natural furnace. Even a fool can easily understand the meaning of these words. Musian naturally also knows the meaning of Luo Tan's words. However, he always felt that something was not quite right. With a being like Luo Tan, it is impossible that he has not seen the physique of Tian Tian Furnace in the past. But Luo Tan was very interested in him. Apparently, she must have guessed that the spiritual energy in her cauldron was not from Kyushu. Musian calmly took a sip of tea and took the opportunity to look at her secretly a few more times. Although it was just a ray of spiritual consciousness, the woman in front of him at this moment looked no different from a normal woman. No, the only difference is that although her clothes are not astringent, they always give people a sense of astringency. Her body exudes a faint sweet fragrance, her snow-white dress wraps her tight and graceful figure, and her pair of slender jade-like legs are wrapped in black silk. At this time, she seems to be holding her cheeks lazily, with a bright smile. Her long, curly hair was spread loosely, her delicate face was adorned with light makeup, and her red lips were soaked in tea, making her look delicate and charming. Well, her figure is similar to Kingdi's sister, her looks should be 9 points, and the most important thing is that she has black stockings. Actually, this junior is not that casual person. Musian said reservedly, Senior should also know about the matter between me and Kingdi. Having said that, I have to say that the dress of the Empress of Yuzhou really impressed Musian's XP. Her skin is as good as snow, and she wears a white skirt with black silk stockings, let Ruoxi try it next time. Among the girls Musian knows, Bai Ruoxi is the most suitable. Sister Mengru and Senior Sister are actually also suitable, but given their personalities, it may take some time to persuade them to play fun games with him. Luo Tan's beautiful eyes were looking forward to it, and her red lips raised a faint arc. Of course I know what happened between you and Qing Emperor, but what happened to you and the saint in the restricted area on the alchemy platform not long ago? Also, I once heard Narcissus talk about it by chance. You must have had a Taoist companion when you were in Tianqian City. She stared into Musian's eyes, and Gong Lianyu's spiritual consciousness resides in her body. This is boring. You have done your homework and are deliberately trying to catch me. Musian kept his smile unchanged, His Majesty Luo Tan is really wise. Ruoxi's body does contain Gonglianu's spirit knowledge. Actually, I'm not asking you to make a decision now, I'm just giving you one more choice. Luo Tan smiled and said, although you already have a Taoist companion, if I remember correctly, Qing Emperor also came from behind. Muzian hesitated and said, why did Senior choose me? If it is a natural furnace, Senior should have seen it before. If it's just a natural furnace cauldron, I've seen it several times before, but if it's a natural furnace cauldron that can advance to an advanced level and can even absorb the spiritual energy in heaven for its own use, this is the first time I've seen it. Luo Tan raised her white and delicate fingertips, tapped the table gently, and raised her beautiful eyes with a slight smile. I can't guarantee that I can allow you to be promoted to Hedeo in the future, but at least I can let you refining the spirit and returning to emptiness within a month. Muzian obviously didn't believe it. Normally, even for those who are the proud ones, it takes a long time to refine the gods and return to the void, and it also depends on their own understanding and luck. They can refine the gods and return to the void in a month. Senior, are you serious? Under normal circumstances, it will naturally take several years or even decades. Everything depends on your own chance. Luo Tan said calmly, however, little friend Mu should know what my physique is. She took a slight sip of tea, and then pushed the teacup in front of Muzian. Muzian glanced at her, and at her smile, he picked up the teacup and took a sip. Boom! For a moment, his body was filled with spiritual energy that was so rich that it seemed to reach straight to the sky. Muzian couldn't help but let out a sound of relief and was stunned for a moment. He slowly raised his head and stared at Luo Tan. Can your natural furnace also directly give me a benefit effect? So this is the spiritual energy of Tian Tian furnace. The natural furnace cauldron in the Hedeo realm was much more exaggerated than he imagined. Just such a ray of spiritual energy can make him improve his cultivation a little. If it complements him. In the past, Muzian had always given his natural furnace aura to others, but he did not know what the aura in the furnace was like. Until now, just tasting a little bit of the taste of Luo Tan Tian's furnace has a charm that makes people feel like they are addicted to it. Luo Tan had a breathtaking and beautiful smile on her face. She was wearing a pair of white boots, which made her legs extra slender. Her beautiful silver eyes were full of teasing. Do you like it? Muzian was silent for a long time and then said softly, I'm afraid it would be hypocritical if I said I didn't like it. After a pause, Muzian continued, however, I cannot go to Yizhou with my sister during this period. I will go on my own after the matter here is over. Besides, I would like to ask Sister Luo to refine a pill for me after this. Elixir? What elixir? Luo Tan asked. Muzian stared into Luo Tan's beautiful eyes and said calmly, take the pill. I know that my sister has such ability. As for the medicinal materials, I will find a way to collect them and go to Yizhou to give them to you. Luo Tan narrowed her beautiful eyes. If I remember correctly, take the pill is a 9th grade pill, and this pill is only useful for demon cultivators. What do you want it for? Muzian was about to say something, but suddenly saw a white figure turned into a residual image and appeared beside him. The slender jade fingers gently touched Muzian's chest. She chuckled and said, but it doesn't matter. If you want take the pill, I will also pay attention to its medicinal materials for you in the future. Thank you, sister. I will repay you when I go to Yizhou in the future, Muzian said respectfully. Verbal thanks, I have heard countless times in the past. Luo Tan snorted, then leaned forward, grasped Muzian's collar with one hand, and pressed her full and upright chest against his arm. She put her red lips close to his ear and said, if you want to thank me, come to Yizhou earlier in the future. And, remember, this is a secret between you and me. The Yizhou Medicine Emperor was still a female emperor who was intimidating in the eyes of the world not long ago. However, at this moment, her always noble and beautiful appearance exuded a sweet and charming breath. Her slightly moist eyes and slightly opened red lips were close to his ear. The faint fragrance emanating from her body filled the air, revealing an indescribable temptation. Musian rolled his throat slightly and stared into her eyes. After their eyes met for a moment, Luo Tan suddenly reached out and pressed his hand on the back of Musian's head, then lowered his head slightly, and gently pressed his red lips on Musian's lips. Musian's eyes first slowly widened, and then he soon realized that the cauldron in his body was gradually filled with the spiritual energy given by Luo Tan. Rich and vast, filled with sweetness that makes people intoxicated. The spiritual energy of the natural cauldron, no wonder it makes people so obsessed. The soft lip fragrance, the breath gently exhaled on Musian's face, and her faint body fragrance also diffused between Musian's nose wings. Before Musian could taste it well, the beauty beside him had already left the table. She licked her lips, but a sweet smile appeared on her face. "This is the first gift I gave you, and it is also my sincerity." Musian blinked and stared at this noble and elegant beauty in a daze. "What's wrong? Why do you look as if you just met me the day before?" Luo Tan glanced at Musian with a cold and pleasant voice. "Mainly because I'm not used to your initiative." Musian was silent for a while. Luo Tan seemed to have guessed Musian's thoughts, and looked at him with a smile in his beautiful eyes. "See you in Yuzhou in the future." The slender figure disappeared in the elegant room. Musian leaned back in the chair, closed his eyes slightly, and couldn't help but sighed in his heart. Big sister is really wonderful. Musian slowly opened his palms and felt the rich spiritual energy flowing in his body. This is the gift that Luo Tan mentioned before. It only takes a few days to completely transform these spiritual energies into his own spiritual energy. And after that, his realm will probably be able to improve by at least one level. The complementarity of the natural furnace is indeed exciting. If this continues, even without cultivation, just complementing with another natural furnace, it will be of great benefit to both parties. Musian closed his eyes slightly, letting his accelerated heartbeat gradually calm down. At the same time, Luo Tan had quietly left the attic and returned to the hall where he had lived during this period. The maid beside him had been waiting in the hall for a long time. When she saw Luo Tan's appearance at this time, she couldn't help but be slightly stunned. "Your Majesty, your face seems a little red, what's wrong?" At this moment, Luo Tan's flawless face like ice and snow was obviously showing two faint blushes, which was completely different from the appearance of always facing the world with an elegant attitude in the past. Could it be that Musian did something rude? An extremely absurd idea popped up in the maid's mind, and then she quickly shook her head gently, dispelling those messy thoughts in her mind. Luo Tan's eyes gradually calmed down, and he shook his head gently, saying lightly, "Don't worry, it's nothing serious." The maid hesitated and said, "But your spiritual consciousness seems to be much weaker." Luo Tan said calmly, "I gave Musian some spiritual energy, that's all. And it doesn't matter if this spiritual consciousness dissipates." The maid first said "Oh," then suddenly froze for a moment, staring blankly at the elegant empress in front of her. "Give Musian spiritual energy. Your Majesty is a natural furnace, and what she said about giving others spiritual energy is not. You should retreat and prepare first, and prepare to leave Dongzhou tomorrow." Luo Tan seemed to be unaware, with her eyes slightly lowered, still thinking about what happened today. Let's not talk about where Musian got the spiritual energy from the heaven. The most important thing for her to value Musian so much and even invite him today is that she saw the possibility in him. The possibility of a breakthrough. The Hedeo realm is already the end of the cultivators. Going one step further cannot be achieved by one's own practice. Because this body is still in the world, it is bound by the rules. If you want to break the bondage, it is naturally impossible to practice according to the ordinary practice. But if it is a natural furnace, then maybe it will be different. Especially, Musian's natural furnace is very special, because it can be continuously upgraded. The refining spirit realm can help the returning void realm. What if he is promoted to the enlightenment realm or even the Hedeo realm in the future? King D is King D after all. Many people always question King D's vision, and even disagree why King D chose him when they were both cultivators in the refining spirit realm. However, judging from the current facts, King D's vision is not bad. When Luo Tan thought of this, he couldn't help but sighed. Although Musian did show a lot of affection for her today, no matter what, he was not as good as King D who knew him early. For now, he can only wait until he arrives in Yuzhou in the future and then come slowly. At the same time, in a private room in the attic of Canghai Peak. Looking out from the private room, you can see the sky-high pavilion located in the void. If you look down, you can see the main peak of the Canghai Peak, with spiritual energy lingering, and sometimes spiritual beasts spread their wings and pass by, and unknown fairy flowers bloom. A woman in a red cheongsam was lying on the table, admiring the scenery outside. Lan Murian had left not long ago, but Lan Feiying still stayed here, admiring the lively exchanges of monks outside. At this time, she seemed to have noticed something, turned her head slightly and glanced, then opened her red lips and sent a message to someone. "Sister Feiying, why are you here?" Not long after hearing Lan Feiying's message, Musian immediately followed the direction of the voice, lifted the curtain of the private room, and saw the young and mature sister lying in front of the table with her chest on the table. She was as charming, sexy, and beautiful as usual. When she saw Musian coming in, a faint smile flashed across her charming eyes. "What a coincidence, I can actually meet our busy man here." Without a senior sister next to her, Musian walked into the private room and sat down next to Lan Feiying. "I participated in the alchemy competition today, so I just went into the attic to rest for a while." "Why is Sister Feiying here?" Musian asked curiously. After not seeing each other for a while, he felt that he seemed to be increasingly unable to see through the woman next to him. Her realm, now with his natural spiritual body, is actually difficult to see through. Lan Feiying stood up and stretched her waist lazily. The tight cheongsam wrapped around the woman's delicate body, outlining a sexy and beautiful curve. She looked at Musian with a smile and said, "You have a woman scent on you. It seems that you were intimate with a woman in the attic just now." Is Sister Feiying's perception so strong? Musian was shocked, but he remained calm on the surface and smiled. "It's just that I like to use perfume recently." I think Sister Feiying smelled the scent of perfume. "Come to think of it, Sister seems to have said that you gave her a box of perfume." Lan Feiying looked thoughtful. Musian reached out and held Lan Feiying's charming waist, and said with a smile, "If Sister Feiying likes it, I will prepare one for you next time I go to Tianqian City." Lan Feiying's eyebrows revealed a faint smile, and she glanced at the boy. "You have always known how to please girls, no wonder my sister likes you." Musian coughed lightly. "Senior sister is my senior sister, our relationship is more complicated, and it is not what Sister Feiying imagined." He. Lan Feiying rolled her eyes at Musian, full of charm. "Do you just treat her as your senior sister, don't you know it in your heart?" "I treat her as my senior sister," Musian insisted. "Then close your eyes now," Lan Feiying said. Musian hesitated, and then closed his eyes. "Don't imagine the scene of you pressing me and my sister on the bed now." Lan Feiying raised a charming arc at the corner of her mouth and stared at Musian. "Musian." He opened his eyes helplessly. Sister Feiying knew that saying this would inevitably make me imagine. "After all, it's still you who have impure motives." Lan Feiying chuckled with her hands covering her mouth. "In fact, if your future realm can surpass my sister and me, maybe it will really work." At the end of the story, Lan Feiying sat with her legs crossed, staring at Musian with a teasing smile. Musian subconsciously glanced at her. Her fiery red cheongsam outlined her graceful and sexy figure. Under the cheongsam, she revealed a pair of snow-white and delicate long legs. Her white and dazzling skin had an ice crystal texture in the dim light. Musian was slightly startled and looked into her eyes silently, but there was no emotional fluctuation in Lan Fading's beautiful eyes, as if she had said something ordinary. When I become stronger, I will suppress you, the goblin first. Musian stretched out his hand and placed it on Lan Fading's leg, saying viciously. The touch of his palm was full of coolness and softness, which made people feel excited. Lan Fading licked her rosy lips and laughed wildly. Instead of retreating at all, she leaned close to his ear and whispered, I am looking forward to it. This little goblin. If it weren't for the wrong occasion, Musian almost couldn't help but kill her on the spot. After chatting with Lan Fading for a few words, Musian suddenly remembered something important and reminded her, by the way, a sect disciple died not long ago. Even in Lianji sect, it may not be completely safe. Sister Fading should be careful. Lan Fading's eyes flickered slightly, and suddenly she chuckled, you care about your sister? After all, Sister Fading is my favorite woman. Musian stared at this charming and beautiful face and said seriously. In his heart, all girls are ranked first. However, Lan Fading rarely flirted with him, and the smile on her face gradually disappeared. If you see this, can you still say that? Her voice suddenly became a little lower, and she took out a ring from the ring. Musian was slightly startled, what is Sister Fading talking about? Before he finished speaking, he saw Lan Fading spread out her palm. When he saw the ring in her palm, Musian's eyes were slightly stunned, and then he subconsciously raised his head and stared at Lan Fading closely. What is this? Don't you already know? Lan Fading supported the edge of the chair with her hands, slightly tilted her head to look at Musian, and smiled, this is Ye Yu's ring. The chosen son you are looking for is here.